Board of Sign Language Interpreter Rules Advisory Committee meeting is convening at 9:42 a.m. on April 10th, 2024. This meeting is being held in person by Zoom video conference and is being recorded. The recording will be posted to the internet for public viewing. Now, licensing office asks that individuals attending through Zoom keep your phone muted and cameras off during the entire meeting until you're given an opportunity to comment during the public and interested parties' feedback at the end of the agenda. I will now call Amanda Smith.
Here.
Christy Carson.
Yeah.
Lori.
Here.
Caitlin.
Here.
You're now waiting. Deanna. This is not being given. Darcy. Is not going to be here? Here. Nissa. Is Buck on the? No. Amber's not going to be here. Edwin
Here.
and Mel. Okay. Members, when you wish to speak, please wait to be recognized and state your last name when we. If you're attending meeting through Zoom, you're asked to not use the chat feature. Public members wishing to speak, this person on the roster. She's available for public members on Zoom. Please email Carrie Edwards at carrie.edwards@oha.oregon.gov and provide your first and last name. Everyone is asked to use appropriate language management protocols. We conduct business. This meeting is now called to order.
I'm sorry, can we just get Carrie's email address one more time?
Yes, CAREEWARDS@oha.oregon.gov. Okay, so, I'll put the meeting to order. So probably the first order of business would be to, talk about how we want the meeting to run. Last time, Darcy chaired the meeting. We want to still, move in that direction. I know when Jack provided public comment, he wanted everybody to go to the camera and speak. I didn't know if that's something we wanted to talk about. I know last time we decided not to do that.
Sorry, after that, so this is Amanda speaking. I think it's important that we collectively, that we focus on our work. Yes, we want access, but we want access for the Zoom audience, but we want to focus on the work that we're doing here. We want to be sure that we're functioning as a group. So what do people think? Christy?
This is Christy. I agree.
This is Edwin. I second the motion.
Mel? I think because now we have so much time, we don't feel rushed like we did before. We have until November, so it's fine if we go in front of the camera, but I'm thinking about how maybe the deaf person like Jack might want to see who's speaking so that we can see the comments, who's making the comments, and so maybe we should respect Jack's wishes. Okay. I agree with Mel. Also, it's just nice to have that camaraderie amongst the board so that we can sit next to the interpreter and just have it be more cohesive and lead it that way. Darcy saying anyone else? No comment. Yeah, doesn't matter to me, says Darcy. speak? Darcy is speaking, seems like we have several yeses. A few people say it's fine to sit in front of the camera. Yes, Caitlin, should we take a vote?
What if we just have people do what they want to do?
Yeah, that's what I was gonna suggest.
People who are comfortable and want to can go sit up there, and people who don't want to can speak and have it interpreted.
Several heads nodding. Darcy saying, well, it seems we can just decide for ourselves. Go up if you want to in front of the camera. Okay,
Okay, this is Sammy, and one other thing, we received an email from Darcy about, some different ways to, run the meeting, so using, the large post-it notes and potentially like a rolling whiteboard, and so, the discussion I think needs to happen here, and then we'll take it back to management and talk about it, so I don't know how effective it would be. One thing I did say is that it would need to be one of the rack members who was the organizing. And then always to remember that anything we write is a public record and needs to be all of that. So I want to make sure that it's functioning still. I'll let you guys decide. We do have the large post-it notes. We want to use that today, but we don't have a roll, any roll.
Darcy. I would like to make a comment related to what you were talking about. At the last meeting, it seemed that there was a lot of discussion where we were trying to figure out what would be included in the provisional, and we kept repeating ourselves. There was confusion, nothing was written down. So I felt that maybe it would be beneficial for all of us if we could write it down. There, just the most important information there regarding licensure on the post-it note, so that it would be written on paper and we can make the revisions at that point and then come to an agreement. Once we had the final comment on the paper, we could put it down in the official record. So it just seemed to me that would be a more efficient way to do it, instead of asking for people to repeat what they said. And there was just a lot of time kind of lost in that. And it would provide clarity if we all had access to the same information, written information, and then we can make adjustments supporting. Yes. What do you think about that?
I don't have a preference.
Amanda? This is Amanda speaking. I agree with you. And it just came to mind that last night I was thinking about it. Maybe we could share a document on the screen, the large projector. It's the same principle as writing on paper, but it would provide visual access to the information so we would know exactly what we're talking about instead of just talking amongst ourselves and getting lost. Yeah, I agree with you. Darcy is asking for other comments. Lori?
I like the whiteboard or doc idea, then we can all add to it actually if we want to. While we're sitting.
No, this is Sammy, no. We won't have a living document that everybody adds to that because it's a public document, right? So it needs to be, it's owned by the state, so it needs to be, overseen by us. If everybody's adding to it and deliberating about something that's not in a public meeting, that's.
I mean, during the meeting, people can
Sure. if you-
type to it and then not outside of the case,
Okay.
is what I was suggesting, but.
What do you think? Darcy's saying we could try it. Should we try it today? Amanda? This is Amanda speaking. We could try using the white Post-it, the large white paper. And just see how it goes with time. And then if we're in agreement that it's working, then we can make a document perhaps next time. But we would make sure, we would trust that Sammy would get everything that we have. And get it down for record. Other opinions, Darcy's comments, Tina?
Tina, Amanda, do you want to get the whiteboard over there and you can write?
I could do that. So I just try. Well, Darcy was saying, should it be up at the front? That way we can all see it if it's up at the front of the room. Perhaps in the corner, because the interpreters are up here, they can block. Okay, and the interpreters will list.
Not writing yet, right? I mean, I'm. Whenever you guys want to write.
Yes.
This is Sammy. So I think one thing that would be helpful is last time we kept kind of bouncing back and forth between provisional and hearing interpreters, then we go to deaf interpreters, and it was a lot of back and forth. And for me, I'm not familiar with your community or anything. So there is going to be a learning curve, so you may have to repeat things for. So that's just, you're in, like, I'll have to repeat things for you. That's government related. So I think we all have to take a minute and step back and remember that. We do have all the time in the world. You don't have to be done by November. You can be done by November 2025. All the time in the world. We have there's no date. We've done proposed rules and they'll be ready by June. I think the first thing that I would like is let's kind of start with information gathering about qualifications for deaf interpreters, focusing on the provisional license. Are there other, like, are CODAs in the same group as a deaf interpreter? Are SODAs in the same group? Are they people with lived experience? Would that be kind of the describer, is that they're lived experience people and not so much formal education? So if you could give us information on kind of what those pieces are, then we can take it back and try to see what box it fits in. Does it fit in an exception box or a specialty license box or a different pathway box? Or because I don't know at this point where these things will fit. And I won't know until I have all of the information. So if we can kind of start there, and then I'll take that back. I was hoping Heather would be here, but I think she thinks the meeting started at 10. Take that back, and then her and I can see what box it fits in, because at this point, we don't know. And then once we are done with that, I have listed all the questions that are all the tasks that you guys were going to work on. I have kind of those listed out on my document, and then I drafted a rule based on the pathways you guys talked about at the last meeting. So we'll go over that afterwards. So if we can kind of do this, and so we can kind of start working on those other types of licensing groups, specialty, exception, whatever they are. So I know last time there was conversation about deaf interpreters having 60 hours of education and training. So that should start off, and then is the describer people with experience? Is that what makes them different than, say, somebody who hasn't formalized education? To put them in a box, I gotta know what it is about them. Why are they different? Does that make sense?
You said what makes the deaf interpreter different? Was it, I heard scriber, but I don't know.
Oh, well,
Sorry, my,
if this is Sammy, the situation is that their qualifications are different than the qualifications for you, a hearing interpreter. Why? Like, what is that descriptor, or is it because they have lived experience and not formal education, or I don't know, what the reason it would be. So if we know the why, then we know who can fit in the box, and then we can know where to box. And maybe there's more than one why, and they might need different boxes. Does that make sense? Okay.
Darcy. Thank you for opening that discussion, because we have discussed a lot on that last time. Just looking at everything, we do need to make things more clear about, definitely separating out things for our deaf interpreters as, you know, as a deaf person, that's related to our deaf interpreter group, and then having our hearing interpreter group. You know, that includes CODAs, SODAs, any member or any person, you know, that has any sort of like, it doesn't matter, like, as long as they're not deaf, you know, that is the group of hearing interpreters. You know, there's some example like a CODA or a SODA, what other examples? You know, there's a list of, you know, a Yoda. I mean, there's so many different things, you know, that could go under that group that has some sort of relation to a family member that is deaf, or a relative that is deaf. So that's one. And then there's this hearing interpreter group. They're still in that hearing interpreter group just because they have an association with a deaf family member of some sort. That doesn't make them in the deaf interpreter group. So I'm gonna so a hearing interpreter, you know, even if they don't have a family or relative, there's these two groups that are in the hearing interpreter group, one that has some sort of relation to a deaf person and some that don't, but that will still be under the same hearing interpreter license. So, you know, some will go through an interpreter training program, or like a CODA or a SODA, child of a deaf adult or a sibling of a deaf adult. You know, maybe they didn't go through an interpreter program, but they have lots of lived experience that they can use as maybe, you know, they've taken a few workshops, or, you know, something that is on par with the educational, like the interpreter training program. Veterans. Oh, like that, like they're veteran interpreters or heritage signing interpreters, you know, people that didn't have an official education in regards to interpreting, but they've been in the deaf community and they've had maybe associated with the deaf community, and then later on became interpreters. So that's the hearing interpreter. So the deaf interpreter group is different. There's different pathways for each of them. So with the deaf interpreter group, most deaf interpreters will not have a formal education. There's not, you know, there's only one or two actual interpreter training programs that are designed for deaf interpreters, and they're on the East Coast. You know, on the left here, there's nothing for that group. So we need to provide more of a foundation pathway for our deaf interpreters. Is that
too much information? Is that good? Are you following?
This is perfect. I'm Sammy, this is great.
Amanda or? Is it, yeah, is it reading, sorry, what we were just talking about there?
Yes, my name is Heather. Thanks for having me here today. I apologize. I had changed the agenda and thought it was at 10, so I apologize for being late. But wanted to, good question about this. You mentioned that, these applicants who, are deaf or have lived experience with a deaf person, that their skills would be on par with that of other interpreters. What types of things could we use to determine whether their skills are on par with the other interpreters? Is there assessment they could do?
Yeah, we could. Yeah, I think that we'll have to think about, I'll have to think about that a little bit more before I can give that a thoughtful answer. So that's a pretty broad one, but I'd like to hold on to that and think about it a little bit more before I answer that. Amanda and then Mel.
Amanda, senior.
So this is Amanda. I think before we answer Heather's question, like you just said, I'm wondering about qualifications of a deaf interpreter or a pathway for a deaf interpreter to have to get to be an interpreter. Because we already had discussed these things, the formal training, the lived experience, the years of its practice. So again, just the formal training, lived experience, years of experience. So how can we parallel those pathways for a deaf interpreter? To qualify, you know, like what do we call that? How do we name that? Yeah, go ahead now.
It won't compensate for two people.
Hmm.
I think they just look at our case and not really signs.
Oh, you're gonna sponsor?
Yeah. To address the deaf interpreter experience, Darcy, these your concept that I did jot some notes down. There's the lived experience. There is formal training through workshop. But also, usually the deaf interpreter is identified by the deaf community as somebody that they have trust in. And they seem to be vetted by the deaf community. The hearing interpreters, we team and use them and work with them to all side listening, saying if they're qualified or they're effective as a deaf interpreter. And then agencies who hire them and schedule them also vet them. So they kind of come up in the ranks. It is not a formalized system necessarily, but there are formal aspects of it along the journey to become a certified. That is why at some point we talk about getting a letter from a community college or a letter from a community saying this person has something ours and has experience. And on the that Heather had asked about sodas and quotas, I mean, forever love the yoga. The aspect of lived experience as an interpreter is not necessarily what I was addressing or thinking of. It is that they have native sign language because they might have been raised in a house where sign language was used. So linguistically, their language is going to be a fluency level. more than experienced interpreter, like myself, who decided to write it. My language acquisition my sign language is still impacting my peers, whereas somebody who's raised by their parents, that was the first language. So that's all we can really attest to, is language competency. The skill of interpreting is a different factor than an actual test for that kind of sense. Okay. This is Amanda. I just wanted to let the people know in the room that I circled on the board. The I with the circle means interpreter, just for people to know, that's my abbreviation. Right here. Right.
Tina, I'm gonna put myself out on a limb here. You guys, as I've been listening over several of these meetings, everybody has some sort of training. Have you thought about this provisional license is good for 5 years? And you have to you can renew it 5 times. It's good for 5 renewals. Have you thought about grandfathering everybody into that group? And then within the 5-year period, before you go to the next level, they meet the requirements of the next level. And this is my thinking behind this, is because you have 5 years, 5 renewals, 5 years of licensure. Those individuals that don't want to go to the next level, they're going to go away. And if you make the requirement for the next level, we have regulatory. If there's complaints that come in on individuals, it can be worked out that way. But it's just a thought, because another thing that I've been thinking about is the individuals in the provisional. You have to have a supervisor. In our other boards that we have worked with, body piercing for one of them, it's very difficult to find a supervisor, to where the field, we get complaints all the time because nobody can find a supervisor, so you can't do any type of training. You can't work without a supervisor. So those are just my thoughts about this, is why not just let everybody come in, make the qualifications very low to the 20 hours or 40 hours of educational training, letter, what have you. They can go in and get that provisional license.
This is Christy. Can I just clarify my own understanding? So whether hearing interpreter or deaf interpreter, everyone would come in under provisional. And then as a next level, then we're saying at that point, we will have developed a pathway for those deaf interpreters with another level of license.
This is Tina. Sammy, wouldn't you be able to put in by the time the 5 renewals are done that you meet a certain criteria, you're learning,
Oh, okay.
what have you, by the time that 5 years is done? That way, everybody that has already been doing this for years on end will be able to go into this provisional, meet the requirements in the 5 years before you go to generalists.
No, I'm not interested. Yeah, my understanding is currently People who have a professional license cannot work in medical and legal settings. Our deaf interpreters are most effective working in medical settings. I would say on average, right now, they're using over 150 hours of deaf interpreter work in the state of Oregon. So we would be cutting out access of over 150 needs, like individual requests, because of the provisional working and not somehow pulled out. My hope was to somehow create a deaf interpreter specialty license that when they apply for a medical license or a legal license, one of the credentials under that to qualify to be having the deaf interpreter license. Because right now we have a credential of deaf, this certification, this certification. And we put in a credential. We put in a credential that requires that they are a deaf interpreter. And then if you qualify, after meeting all the medical requirements, the 60 hours of medical training, or working in a legal setting, after they've done that legal training, they could work in a setting. It is crucial that we keep our deaf interpreters in medical setting. If it's possible. Christie, and then Amanda.
I have forgotten my thoughts.
Okay, Amanda. This is Amanda speaking. So I think, Tina, your comment about the provisional is a great idea. If we want to open the gates, so to say, so through that supervisory process, having the training, this time to get experience, and then we can become a generalist. I do believe that is different from the point Mel is making. Mel, your point is that we need a pathway for deaf interpreters who are already currently working. I don't believe that falls under the provisional level. So maybe that would be under the generalist level, maybe that could be a separate license, I'm not too sure, but definitely not the provisional, if they are already working. For those who are newer interpreters who feel that they would qualify as a deaf interpreter, we can give them the provisional license so that they have the time to gain training and experience. So that would require some wordings being removed from the law itself of the provisional license, so it's not as restrictive, but that's another story. All right, Sammy.
This is Sammy. Just for clarification, are we still working on provisional or we want to jump to generalist? Because Tina was specifically talking about provisional. And anybody who wants to be a sign language interpreter would meet this minimum competency, let's say 20 hours of education, or 20 hours of experience, and it can be a letter from community member, interpreter agency, and they get the provisional license for 5 years. So that's what that is. We want to move to generalist and figure that out. That would be different.
You know, this is Tina, you had stepped out and Mel had brought up the weight. But in order to have the medical or the legal with the provisional.
So, this is Heather. I think my understanding was where we were seeing that is that there is a need in the community to have individuals with this lived experience that covers deaf and to have them be able to work in the medical community. And that if, and the thought was, is that, to have that specialty license where, those applicants would then, with licenses, would then be able to work in the medical community and not have them go through the route of provisional because they wouldn't be able to work in the medical community in provisional. And what I was hearing from that, like breaking it down a bit, is that there is a need to have these individuals in the medical community. So regardless of which box we fit them in, that it is important that that box allow them to work in the medical. So regardless of whether we have them go provisional and generalist and then supervisory, or whether we have a different license, or whether we do something else, that is statutes allow us to, that the idea is it's very important to keep them working in the medical community because there's, that it's crucial and would cause harm if we exclude that group of people.
And this is Sam, those would be people that don't meet the generalist and supervisory or supervisory. So
Or that
all
they may, depending on which box we put them in.
is if they did, why would it matter?
Well, that we can figure, we can put them in the box.
So they're making, okay,
But the need is to have them in medical.
This is Caitlin speaking. Is there a way that we can add under provisional, if we can add, they are not allowed to work in legal, medical, educational settings, except under direct supervision, which no.
And this is Heather, I was shaking my head, no, we can't do that by statute. The provisional tells us where provisionals are. Heather, are you switching?
This is Christy. I'm just sharing. Sorry. This is Christy. I'm just sharing feedback that I've received that when we have people come up, it continues to be very blurry and not very helpful for the public audience.
Answer your question. Hi, I'm Darcy. Yeah. Heather, I was just thinking about your question. In regards to Mel Cummins and Amanda's. As far as this, gap interpreters and hearing interpreters go, Amanda, you were saying something about, having the deaf interpreter being able to eventually and you get new deaf interpreters into the field. And using those hours, maybe some sort of minimum hours that we set up, maybe it's 24, maybe it's, hearing interpreters, deaf interpreters, having some sort of, who are not certified. Having some sort of minimum set up, and we can decide what that is, figure out what those qualifications are. As far as the interpreters who are already working, deaf interpreters who are already working in the field. Maybe they have some, experience with the years that they can demonstrate, be it medical or legal. We have had some sort of separation, some sort of pathway for those interpreters to get the generalist license, whether it's education, I don't know about the educational case law, if that falls in that same category, but medical for sure. And for example, we have several interpreters, deaf interpreters who are already working in the community, who are not yet certified under medical. And like 95% of, they're already experienced working interpreters. I assume legal is the same as medical in a lot of ways. Supervision, to make sure some of the people are vetted, but I am personally aware of a few medical interpreters who say that some deaf interpreters aren't vetted,
And if they need a little more time to develop their skills. So there's gotta be a good pathway set up for them in that process. The demand is there, the demand is high. I mean, if we have a deaf person who is in the hospital. And we have an interpreter at one spot. You can have a deaf person go with them, or have an interpreter with that deaf person. So what's best? An interpreter agency would prefer to use a deaf interpreter. For low key situations to sort of sit or write or text or talk or whatever it is they, or PRI, whatever they need to do to communicate. We have the technology to do that. To communicate with the deaf interpreter, and then the deaf interpreter can sign to the deaf patient. Or deaf blind or whatnot. So the nurses, they, you know, in emergency situations, they often use BRI, so they're used to using that technology. So maybe you can think of other ways, other pathways for deaf interpreters to work with you. So that's one idea. As far as hearing interpreters go, CODAs, SOGAs, having their lived experience, again, you can't compare. It is not the same. So I still really disagree. It's total apples and oranges. It's not similar. You can't compare those two. So does the CODAs, that group, they have a lived experience, but oftentimes their signing isn't great. They're not as fluent as deaf. Their voicing isn't great. They just don't have the formal skills or the formal training. So they actually need some more improvements, some more time to build their skills to become on par with their colleagues. So anyways, that's kind of my perspective. Hi, I'm Amanda. I really agree with the comments that Rusty just made. We've been talking about, you know, the deaf and hearing interpreters. I wonder if there's not a better way to vet these. For new interpreters versus deaf interpreters. So we can agree, like manage that gate, right? I wonder if we can have a general license with two different categories, sort of a new interpreter and a veteran interpreter. I can't remember what the legal wording of that was, but your general license, there's gotta be different pathways. So anyways, I'm just thinking about what's the best way to sort of set this up, because veterinary interpreters and hearing interpreters, we've got these different categories, but they're not necessarily on the same page. The evidence listed. So some have formal training, some have years of experience. So what's it gonna look like? And there's some thoughts that I'm gonna let you know.
I just have a random question from what Amanda was just saying. This is Carrie. So how do you get those two to equal out then? Training, or sorry, like formal training and years of experience, like 5 years experience equals this formal training. Does that make sense? So how do you get those two to be on the same level?
Heather, one way to think about this is that the structure that is provided for in statute already provides for a new versus a vetted interpreter. Because the vetted would be the supervisory, someone who meets those qualifications. A person does not need to step through every single part of the license. They don't need to come in as a provisional. They can come in as a supervisory if they meet the qualifications. And so as you're thinking about these different licenses, you could put in the back of your head, I know your structure right now is provisional, but you could put in the back of your head that there's going to be a category for, individuals who have a certain amount of experience, and as you describe it, or need whatever the letter qualification or assessment qualification is, and they automatically come in at that supervisory level. And then they can do medical, and then they can do legal. But when you're thinking about it, right now, if you're working on provisional, it's the people that would meet that standard, and that would be the new people that do need some more of that training, vision, that are not quite there yet. That there's going to be people who top out and are already in the supervisory category. So you could consider that as something you're gonna get to. And just know that that's also a way that you can address these individuals with lived experience, that are coming in with experience in the field.
Darcy? I actually have a question for you, Heather, in regards to that. That's actually a really great perspective. So we have these lists of requirements for those specific categories. Is that both for hearing and deaf? As far as lived experiences go, or? Or, see. I don't have a clear thought. So you said something, shoot, I can't remember exactly what you said that triggered my response, but I don't remember it. Shoot. You know what? I'm gonna have to come back to it, please. Yeah, no.
Darcy, I'm wondering if this next week, what you're saying. I'm sorry, I'm already close. Because there is a clear pathway of formalized educational training and assessment to hearing interpreters. There's that pathway, and the deaf interpreters have a different pathway that's not as formal and as structured. So for deaf interpreters to get into that supervisory status, are you saying, Heather, that we could add lived experience for the deaf interpreter, but still maintain a more formalized structured pathway for hearing interpreters? Or would that lived experience be available to both hearing interpreters?
So this is Heather. So I think that's something to work on, because if you think about what you're really trying to do here, is decide what competency level you have in different competency, okay? So if a person is coming in at a supervisory license and they meet a competency level, it doesn't matter what their, where they receive that competency, as long as they meet the level. So if you're structuring pathways, you could have one of those be education, training, supervision. Another pathway could be lived experience. So who's going to fall under that? What is going to be how you define lived experience? And so you're not saying, you're not necessarily excluding, but the people who have competency based on that lived experience would qualify. Because again, what you're trying to get to is competency at the different levels. And say at the supervisory is basic competency of this, and as long as you meet that, then you get that license.
So when we're writing, this is Christy, when we're writing the language, it would be not an and, it would be an or. This or this. So now let's bullet out the this and this.
This is Heather, yeah. Yes,
Lori?
This is Lori. I think we are starting to spin again, and I'm wondering about the possibility of creating a chart where we actually start identifying what provisional looks like on a deaf pathway and a hearing interpreter pathway, and just start throwing out ideas on what we think criteria are, because I think we're talking too much.
Amanda? This is Amanda. I absolutely agree with that comment. I'm just curious, how many of you feel comfortable with the provisional gate, like open the gate, just number of hours, number of training, amount of training, what else would you say? Letter of recommendation for the community member, and then supervision. For 5 years. Can I just get a show, and how many people feel comfortable with that so far? We have a couple of hands, we'll do 4 hands, the 3 and an ish. How many people feel like there's something missing? So no hands.
This is Christy. I have a comment.
Go ahead, Christine.
I think I'm at the point now where I need to see it. I need to have it.
I've got it in here.
Oh. Thanks for moving.
Amanda is writing on the paper, must have supervisor for direct or indirect.
This is Sammy, are we saying for all people in the world who wants a provisional, 40 hours and some letters? Deaf, hearing, GOTAs, SOTAs, YOTAs, everything. With stipulation.
This is Christy, and I'm just clarifying that we have yet to define direct or indirect supervision. Correct, right?
That's absolutely right.
So our other boards, indirect supervision is indirect. You can meet up with them, you can go over what you've done. Direct is somebody's right there with you at all times.
Well,
Kind of.
this is Sammy, depending on the program. Some are direct is in the building, some are indirect is in the building, but you can be on the 4th floor, so it depends. But I actually provided that document 2 meetings ago, different options. It included licensed officers.
We're gonna switch interpreters.
But yes, there's many options for that.
I'm struggling with the supervision piece. Are we saying that the indirect and direct supervision is going to be provided by a supervisory interpreter? Question mark?
This is Sammy, a generalist or a supervisor. Licensed holder.
This Tina, then you gotta, how many supervisors do you think are already up there that can go directly into that? And how many is gonna be available to supervise?
This is Christy. That's what we started to discuss last time. You know, how people would access a supervisor, how they would locate a supervisor. Yeah, I think we need to be mindful of that.
So this is Amanda speaking. So the law says we have to require supervision for the provisional license. We haven't yet defined what that means, though. They can sorry. To get the provisional license, they have to be comfortable.
Are you guys comfortable with that, with having just to get a provisional license, to have a certain amount of training and a letter from the student? Are we missing something, and if so, what is it?
No, this is Mel. Because the deaf community is a protected class under the ADA. And I know that you live in interpreting already. I am hesitant to say there can't be an ASL language assessment of some sort. It doesn't have to be a formal certification, like going through the Slippy or the whatever. It's saying that you have taken some type of coursework in sign language would be really important for me to know that there is actual language. I hate to say it, but we've all seen the news where somebody fakes sign language and stands up next to a governor and it's all over the television. It happens. So we have to have some type of ASL language proficiency, be a class, something that shows coursework that this person actually knows sign language, unless.
Is this for all humans? All deaf, hearing, all interpreters?
This is Mel. At one point, we had talked about following our spoken language interpreters, that if I show I've gone to school in the United States, I have all that. For deaf individuals, I think we can say that they have language competency in English by having graduated high school. Same with hearing people. I think that English proficiency is there through education and having gone through our academic systems. If you want a deaf person to take a language assessment to prove their native language, I think that sure, but for hearing people, which is 98% of our workforce, there has to be some type of language proficiency, a bare minimum. Tell me you took ASL 1 through 6. Show me something. You took it in high school, right? Just anything.
This is Deanna. I agree with that. In the spoken language, there has to be proof of proficiency in both English and the interpreted language. And I mean, the one thing that we were looking at when we first started that is in the beginning, there was no proficiency. And so as long as you took a test saying that you knew the theory of interpreting, you could interpret even if you didn't have the language proficiency. So I agree with Melanie on that, that there's, even if it's something very basic, there should be some type of language proficiency for the English and for the sign language. For all of the licenses.
I would say for provisional, not necessarily all of them licenses.
Because you're gonna have it for.
When you pass your national exam, you should.
Yeah, right. I mean,
No.
This is Christy. I think, prior to your third potential, I was struggling with, that's it, that's all we're asking for. And so I would be in agreement with demonstrating proficiency in some way. So I would be curious to know, what are those options then? I've taken level year 1, 2, 3 of sign language. I've taken interpreting classes, but not enrolled in a program. I have, like, what is?
this is Deanna, sorry, Debbie, really
This is
quick.
the interpreter, sorry, Deanna, we're waiting for Darcy to pick on people before we go. I think you missed that because you. Right there at the beginning. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry.
What about codas and, I mean, what will that look like in proficiency? Thank you, sorry.
So this is Sammy. If you want us, based on your meeting the last meeting, I drafted what I thought your pathways would look like. With hearing interpreters in mind, but I don't know if that you want to land on that now. Pathway 1 was an academic degree. Pathway 2 was the CASLI exam, proof of being proficient in English and proof of being proficient in ASL. And those two things were assigned out to people to try to find what that would look like. Pathway 3, education and training, so submit proof to 40 hours of education and the proficiency in English and ASL. And then as pathway 4, which we hadn't talked about, would non-ASL interpreters, so a Spanish interpreter, sending interpreter, that's what that. So if you wanted to look at this, it might go to our list. But I don't know.
We can pass it out. That would be nice. This is Darcy speaking. We have a comment related to the minimum for both deaf interpreters as well as hearing interpreters. Okay, I struggle a bit with the concept of requiring the same, like the same requirements between the two groups. Because for hearing interpreters, for the provisional license, okay, they could satisfy that requirement of graduating from the interpreter program, training program. And we can add a certain number of hours, that would. We don't have to add extra hours because the other path would have a 40-hour training. But most deaf interpreters do not graduate from an interpreter training program because here in the West, we don't really have that. So I'm thinking about the deaf interpreters and what would be the minimum qualification. I know
For a hearing interpreter that graduates from a interpreter training program, right, they're set. But what do we do about our deaf interpreters? Where do they start? What is their minimum? Is that 30, 25, 40 hours? Like, where's their minimum? Just for this general, and then, quotas, whatever, quotas, all that group could go through kind of the deaf interpreter path. As long as they're meeting that minimum of whatever, 30, 40 hours of training. Just some sort of proof. High school graduation, is that good enough?
And then to assess their signing skills, there would be a 2.0 or a 3.0 or a 3.5 for the IPA perhaps. And then also particularly in English, the fluency, I'm struggling a bit for this category because again, quotas, they have a similar difficulty with English because it's not their first language. American Sign Language is their first language. They've been raised in a signing environment, so quotas might also, they might have better English skills than signing skills. It varies among that group. So when we think about English fluency, we have to find a different way to approach this group of people. Just throwing it out there.
Thank you. So are we looking at something like provisional license, column 1, ASL interpreter, column 2, codas and sodas, column 3, deaf interpreters, and those requirements?
Amanda? This is Amanda speaking, and I'm thinking that we arrived at a place where there's no, we're not having to be driven for provisional interpreters. And when I think about, well, how do you feel about English fluency being measured by a degree? It's already implied in there. It doesn't matter, deaf interpreter, quota, soda. We have to discuss what the degree level is, but that's it. Just for the English proficiency, right? But then for the ASL proficiency, there could be group coursework like Mel discussed. There could be an assessment. There are different ways. You can have a letter of recommendation and a member from the community. So we could have evidence for that.
If this
Well, this is Darcy speaking. I would like to keep the ASLPI and the SLPI for the generalists, just keep that set as the minimum. The 3.0. 3 points, 3+ as the minimum, and I think that could work.
This is Sammy. I didn't put that specifically in here. But obviously that could be one of those things, but then you can add it later. Yes, we're gonna see if there's other things.
Amanda? This is Amanda again. So when you said 3+ for the ASLPI or the SLPI, that's one option, or is that for everyone? Oh, maybe both, just for deaf people. Well, would it be a requirement to show the ASL proficiency? And it's asking, could you do coursework? How do we measure that? Are there assessments, community letters? There are many different ways to show that, right? In terms of, is it parallel to the question? Showing in English.
I mean, are the pathways here a little accurate? Like, is somebody with an academic degree, obviously knowing that we have to determine what those are, where they're from, what's accredited or not, don't worry, I have all those questions over here. If somebody has that,
Or what page are we on?
page 2 of the one thing I just handed out. Is that a pathway for someone to get a license? You have a degree, obviously, and we're gonna determine what that degree is. Can you check that one off? Or is there something more that would be needed? If they have this academic degree? If I remember right. I had to ask questions about English proficiency and. I was told,
Yeah, I was gonna say the same thing. So this is Darcy. We have to be careful when we talk about ASL coursework that they've taken. You know, because some ASL programs in that area, I mean, there's varying classes and how good they are. So, I mean, if they've already taken what ASL 1, 2, or 3, that they're gonna go ahead and interpret, like, how are we gonna measure that for all? You know, because all teachers are not created equal, right? So just to determine qualification for the coursework, because there's such variance in the courses that are offered. You know, some like still teach courses in C-Sign, for example. So, you know, how are we gonna measure C-Sign finding exact English? So how are we going to determine and match and know that they're actually teaching American Sign Language in their coursework and not teaching some variant of ASL? Go ahead, Amanda. So this is Amanda. I agree, we do have to be careful, but at the same time, we need to open up some gates for the provisional interpreters. And we have to trust the community a little bit, you know, at some level. So C-Sign is not ASL, but deaf people still use it. You still use C-Sign, finding exact English. So does that not count at all? That's hard to say. So what if we say 3 years of college ASL or 2 years of college ASL or 2 years of 2 or 3 years of some sort of above this certain level ASL? So remember, they still have the supervisors who are providing that support and, you know, recommending training and stuff that they still have to say, take. So, you know, it's not really maybe something is, you know. So, you know, but we gotta make sure that there's interpreters for everybody in, you know, all the areas that we need. So, you know, there's different kind of interpreting situations that people can be in, that we need to provide interpreters for, and at the same time, we need to not be too restrictive. We do want to raise the bar, absolutely, but we kind of have to do it incrementally. That's just my opinion. Darcy saying yes, maybe go ahead.
So, this is Sammy. If somebody comes in with a, let's just say associate's degree and bachelor's degree, would they qualify, and they have a supervisor all lined up, would they qualify for a provisional license? Whether they are deaf, hearing, soda-codas, whatever. They come in, they've got a degree, and they have a supervisor lined up. Do they qualify for a provisional? That's my question.
Christy and then, or Mel, or Caitlin, and then Christy, I think her hand was raised, so Caitlin. So just to clarify, this is Caitlin, a degree in an interpreting program specifically, or are you saying any sort of degree? I just want to clarify that.
This is Sammy.
In Sammy's regards to Caitlin's question. Okay.
I put submit proof of having a degree in sign language interpreting. You guys said accredited interpreter education program.
Caitlin giving thumbs up, yes. Christy, do you have? Okay. Christy had the same question. Go ahead, Sammy.
So if somebody had a degree, associate's, bachelor's, I don't know how far they go, in sign language interpreting, and they had a supervisor lined up, do they qualify for a provisional license?
This is there's lots of head nods, there's some yeses. Darcy's asking if everybody is in agreement.
Okay,
We have thumbs up from everybody, agrees with everybody.
so,
Like, that would be a good thing.
okay,
Yeah, majority thumbs up. So do we need to discuss this again, or is this an or and, or?
No, I'm just-
need to add?
I'm kind of like, let's check off that pathway. That's the cream of the crop, right? So next one would be exam. That's what we talked about last time. So I'm just gonna call it Castley, that's what you guys call it. Castley exam. So if somebody passed the Castley exam and they, whatever you guys decide, that proficient in English and proficient in ASL, do they qualify? And they have a supervisor, do they qualify for a license in provisional license? Okay, here's the one, I think that goes to Darcy's point, is proof of having received 40 hours of education or training. This is probably where you want to wrangle and corral what this looks like. Is it ASL 1, 2, 3, or there's kind of different methods that we can. You don't want to box it in so much in the rule that you can't have options, but you can, you know, including but not limited to kind of things that are simple. And then you guys need to determine what that is, and then the proficiency in English and ASL.
Go ahead, Deanna.
This is Deanna. So, the way I understand it, in order to go into the 40-hour, 60-hour course here that Oregon Health Authority has, and I may be incorrect, someone will correct me. I thought you had to have like the RID certification or something like that to get in. I may be wrong.
Shaking her head no.
This is Sammy, to get in where?
This is Deanna, to the course that is like OHCIA is offering for the Oregon Health Authority.
This is Sammy, I think it could be that course, or it could be different course. I don't know what courses they offer. PCC has courses, yeah.
This is,
Will
I
has courses, maybe they're those.
think what Diana, this is Mel. What Diana is trying to explain is, to jump into, like, right now, to have a generalist be able to work in medical, and to get that medical extra specialty license, you have to go through an Oregon Health Authority approved training, which is specific to 60 hours to get that special medical license. But here, we're talking about something different.
Right.
This is different education.
I'm sorry, this is Deanna. I was looking at the submit proof for being proficient in ASL in order to get into a 40 hours of education.
You give me a where are you looking?
Yeah, where is it?
I'm here on the second page on B for our C pathway.
Page 2, you said P, 2B.
Page 2, subsection 7, down, pathway 3.
Pathway 3.
So which ABC is it?
So this is Deanna, this is, I'm the B, and I jumped to it because I'm wondering, we're talking about provisional life.
Hold on just
Yeah.
1 second. Everybody can't access the discussion.
Sorry, my mind just went directly there.
Okay, thank you. I am there's so many A's and B's on that page. It was hard to know which A and which B.
So my mind just directly went there because we were talking about the proficiency. And what I was thinking, my mind went to, in order to get the 40 hours of education, don't they already require you to have proficiency in English language and proficiency in ASL to get into those 40-hour classes? That's my question.
This is Christy. I'm just going to vocalize. There were some no's in the room.
So under pathway C, my understanding is, and Sandy, correct me if I'm wrong. This has nothing to do with HCI at this point. You could state whatever type of training in your rule to qualify. If you all felt that HCI training would be sufficient, then you could indicate that. If you don't, then you could somehow exclude it. You could say coursework from an accredited interpreter education program, which would then exclude that HCI specific training. But what we're talking about under that third pathway is not specific to HCI.
Thank you.
That is correct. This is Sandy.
Darcy? So, yeah, Heather, exactly what you said, I agree with. Okay, so I feel like the educational training needs to be like code of ethics training. Or like maybe 6 hours minimum of that, and then, gosh, maybe minimum interpreter, like some minimum interpreter training hours courses. In regards to like the actual field of implementation, maybe 20, 25 hours, and obviously, I feel like we need to decide on maybe, if we're gonna decide on a total of 40 hours, then we can go from there and break it down to see minimums in different, like things like ethics. Or, actual interpreting, or, I think maybe deciding on that first group of hours would be kind of important. So, yeah, I feel like we need to really, and I do think we need some sort of accreditation, like the hours need to be approved by some law. Either online or in person, and we got to make sure also that deaf interpreters are able to access that training too. So we need to look at that too. I don't know if we want to break it down or if we want to have them together, but if we do have them together, we need to make sure that deaf interpreters have the same access to those trainings as hearing interpreters. Darcy saying like and not have those hours in medical or legal settings, but that training would be separate under those licenses.
This is Sammy. One thing to consider is it's possible, since HCI has been licensing people or putting them on a registry for longer, that they may not qualify for a generalist or supervisory license, but they may qualify for the provisional. And you may want to consider them using that, since we're starting at a baseline and we're trying to get people in. Maybe not in 5 years, you won't do that, but maybe now that's just one more access point. And would the training that we're talking about need to be accessible every time for everybody, or could there be varying types that maybe just accept accessibility? Does it have to be accessible to everyone? And when you say approved by, what do you mean by that? that coursework needs to be improved.
Go ahead, Amanda. This is Amanda. When you said where, thinking about, something that came to mind was, you had said, like, approved. I was thinking it could be like coursework, fine, whatever, but it could be like CEUs, like approved CEUs, something, because really that 40 hours of training, I'm not imagining it, something that we can design for everybody to take. I'm thinking of it as people just pick their own stuff and then whatever their hours is, as long as they accumulate to 40 hours, So I think we already have a CEU system that we use to have approved CEUs, so I feel like that could kind of work for our 40 hours. We might as well take advantage of that system that's already there, like we can already count that, so that, and the HCI, if people already have that HCI training, so we want to count that, even though it's medical. I think that was my comment. Go ahead, Mel.
And this is Mel. I'm looking under pathway 3, education and training in that area. If we put in submit 40 hours of training, include workshops, CEUs, yep. And then submit proof of being proficient in the English language, high school diploma, any type of diploma. Submit proof of being proficient in ASL. It could be coursework that is accredited by a college. So that's not a community ed ASL class. Because if you have coursework by a college, then it has, measurable outcomes that you have to pass, right? There's COGS and technical standards. Community ed, learning of the church looks different than a formalized coursework. Or you could take a language assessment, a slappy. If you're deaf or if you're a coder or somebody else who doesn't have the formalized training in coursework, that costs money, right? To be able to attend college is privilege. Be able to take classes is a privilege. So there are avenues to get your language assessed if you can't do the coursework. That's from an please. Is that it? Am I right? Yeah.
These rooms are gonna glitch. Lori?
I'm looking at pathway C or 3 also. And I'm thinking that if we are having folks submit proof of being proficient in ASL, whatever we are having that look like, then we need to be more specific with what those 40 hours look like, because if I'm clever, I'm going to use the same proof for the 40 hours as I'm going to use for the proficiency in ASL. I'm going to say I took ASL 1 and 2. I'm done with both of those. And I think what we want in those 40 hours is demonstration of something specific to interpreting as opposed to ASL learning.
This is Mel, and if I read this, it says submit proof of having received 40 hours of education in sign language interpretation.
But we're saying education.
It could be a workshop. It could be a train. Are you saying clarified education? I guess what I understood your question to be was, you wanted to make sure that 40 hours was
Only interpretation.
only in interpreting, and language proficiency is separate.
Correct.
And I think that
You think that's clear?
it does this sign language interpretation. And education could look like formal coursework, or it could be workshops and seminars.
Okay, yeah, all right.
Mrs. Sandy, are you, just clarify for me, Lori? I think what I'm hearing you say is the English proficiency is for the ASL is education, so they might combine both of those, and maybe what submit proof of having 40 hours experience in training, maybe that's what that is instead of education. Would that work? I
This-
don't know.
This is Lori. I think if I reread it the way Mel was reading it, I agree with her that that's probably clear. I think I was reading it differently, but I do think we want to reiterate that that first point is with respect to interpretation, not just the learning of ASL, or the training of ASL. So I think we're okay.
Okay, this is Amanda. I do think that it's important in regards to the 3 separate licenses that we have different requirements. So what does it stand on this? 40 hours, we're halfway through, we have 3 pathways. So 40 hours is 1. English proficiency and ASL proficiency. That you would need all 3 of those. You can't double dip. So I wanted to emphasize that. Heather.
Is better. What now for pathway 3? What is the clarification and language was submit proof having received 40 hours of education and training and interpreting related to sign language. Interpretation. Does that clarify it for you, Lori?
Say that again.
This is Sammy. If it got confusing for Lori, it's gonna be confusing for others. So better. That's in my experience.
This is Darcy.
Yes. Go ahead.
I'll just repeat. So the word interpreting related to sign language interpretation would be included. That way, there's emphasis on that the education and training is in interpreting that is related to sign language interpretation. Is that more confusing to you or less? Does that get to your point?
This is Lori. I think if we said submit proof having received 40 hours of interpreter education and training. No, that's stupid. Never mind. I think it's fine as it is.
What?
Christie?
Correct me if I'm wrong, but our goal is still to outline the evidence or submit proof of being proficient in ASL. And I think if that were, there's 3 boxes, and then we have the parentheses and we've outlined the evidence, it will become clear that this cannot be the same as this.
Yeah. I think that's true.
Can you repeat that, Christie?
So we're saying there's 3 check boxes they have to meet. And we still have to define what the evidence is for showing proof for both English and ASL. So on that checkbox, if it says submit proof, we then have to say such as passing, taking, all the different ways they can show evidence. I think if that's listed out, it will become clear that you need the 40 hours of education related specifically to interpreting, and you have to show your ASL proficiency. And this is the way you could do it.
This is Amanda. I'm going to use English because it's a question for Sammy and Heather. I wonder, Lori, if one of the things you were responding to is the fact that some ASL courses have an INT prefix because they're part of the interpreter training program. And so if the office gets a thing that says INT 103 ASL 1, it might look like an interpreting course, but it's an ASL course. So my question to you all is what does the evidence need to look like for you? If it says ASL 101, but it has an INT prefix, will you know to count that for ASL?
No, I'll have to be told what that.
Okay.
Probably. I mean, Tina can talk to that. This is Nancy, sorry.
Amanda. This is Amanda. So a few follow-up questions for Darcy. PCC, for their ASL courses, there is no INT prefix. So same for Western Oregon University. Sorry.
So the Oregon schools won't have that issue, just wanna add that. Oh, okay, I'll drop that. This is Darcy. Again, if we look at the 200 level course, if you're in a community college, the 200 level course is considered more focused on interpreting, where the 100 level courses are typically an introduction, and they will have that INT prefix in general. If it's a university level course, they might be labeled as the 300 or 400 level. But most interpreting programs, do they use that INT prefix? Not all of them. So we can definitely double check that with any of the experts in those educational institutions who can let us know whether or not that is a standard. I do know for ASL, the prefix used is typically more general. It's just a foreign language, like AAPA or, JAP for Japanese, for example.
I'm probably gonna, sorry, this is Lori. I'm probably gonna hate myself for making the suggestion. But with respect to pathway number 3, I almost think the broader we leave it, the better. Let the applicants decide that they're meeting those criteria, because ultimately they're going to have a supervisor. They're gonna have to meet quantitative criteria to move up to the generalist. They're gonna have to pass a test to get there. So if they don't meet it at the proficiency level, if they come in and they are awful, then we're gonna rely on those supervisors to do their job and say, you can't go out there and do this.
Mel, I think,
Yeah.
I like what you're saying, and being systems wise, HLO needs to have a box to check.
Yeah.
Something that goes same, check.
Yeah,
And so if we don't clearly outline what proof of being proficient in ASL would be, what box are we gonna check? Like, there's one analyst for 900 applications going, well, they're not gonna read each letter, you know what I mean?
right.
That's maybe you will. It's not gonna be easy.
This is Sandy, what are just throw out some examples of showing, I think I'm English proficient, and I think you said if you're a high school graduate, that's one. Are there others? What are they? Give us some, maybe there's a way to corral them with some more simplified language.
Yeah.
So does that mean GED as well? Because we just said high school diploma. Does that mean a GED will be?
Or its equivalent.
Lori?
This is Lori. So what if we said for submitting proof of being proficient in ASL, that someone has taken college level ASL courses 1 through 4? Accredited college courses 1 through 4. And then English, graduated with a high school diploma or its equivalent. And then the 40 hours, we just let people plug in their stuff.
And then. I just lost my thoughts. This is Amanda. So Lori, you were saying that ASL level 1 through 4, do you need 2 years? Because ASL 1 to 4 and our quarter system is equivalent to a year and a third. So. So do you need 2 years? What do we think? What does the group think? 2 years, minimum 2 years? That work?
This is Deanna. We're talking provisional, right? And we're trying to open that up, and I'm not sure how that is the 1 through 4. I thought when she said 1 through 4, because that was my question as well, is that 4 years of an accredited college of sign language? Okay. 2 years, is that, I mean, is 1 year not enough? Okay.
This is Darcy. I want to say the 100 level, like 102 to 103 is not enough to make you proficient or competent at all. It would be a minimum of ASL 6 or above, at least ASL 5 or 6 or above, and a completion of a 200 level course. But the
How many years is
100
that?
and 103 would not be sufficient, not about 2
That's-
years.
oh, okay,
Or that-
because I'm-
Would that be? We have an accelerated program path that you could complete within 2 years.
Okay.
4 terms within 2 years. That means that a lot of our students who enter the program and are wanting to become interpreters can take that accelerated ASL course term in order to get to that 200 level, which is an equivalent of the 102 or 201, 202, 203. It'd be like the 100 levels would be that accelerated
I
course.
think when I brought that up, this is Lori, I was thinking about my daughter who took it in high school. So that was 4 years in high school, and I would think she'd be ready for a provisional.
Baseline.
But that's different than the college level, so.
So this is Sandy, going back to English proficiency. Sounds like GED and or equivalent, high school diploma. Would, and I could be way off on this. Is the SL, the slippy, that is the, not the other one? What are those doing?
Those are ASL, those are ASL.
So those are, so, okay, so those would be telling us if you're proficient in ESL. So, understanding that. Would those 2 things be showing us, would you have those as part of showing proficiency in ASL? Would those be 2 bullets under that? And are those similar to what Darcy just said?
Chrissy's running.
This is Mel, that's exactly what Darcy did say though.
Okay.
For ASL proficiency, and instead of having, I think the score could be lower. For baseline minimal entry, I think Darcy said a 3+, we could say 3. I don't know, I don't, yeah.
Yeah, put 3.
Yeah, a 3. Yeah, could,
This is Sammy, I was comparing it to what she just said.
oh, sorry.
Not what she said a while back, I remember that. But what I heard was a ASL 1 or 2 wouldn't suffice for proficiency. My question is, okay, I understand that, but would the SL, whatever it is, be a standard? And are those the same? So could you have, like, are those
Be
similar?
it or, either or.
Okay.
It's time for an interpreter switch.
Darcy, this is Darcy. I just want to clarify real quick. So the SLPI, it's set up as like a minimum of 3. So how do we measure that? Is it very similar to a 200 level ASL equivalency? And would that be the standard? With hearing interpreters, TOTAs, SOTAs, whatnot, maybe they don't have to take the ASL classes. Maybe they're, their parents are deaf, they have siblings, so they're already using the language, they already have that equivalency of the 2 year. So maybe they can skip taking that and just take the SLPI, or ASLPI, and then they take the coursework or whatever. So maybe we could do something like that and make that the minimum. So, like she was saying, like a high school diploma or a high school diploma is good, the classwork is okay, but at the same time, they still need to put together coursework to satisfy that requirement. I don't know, what are your thoughts?
This is Mel, I just want to clarify what I think Darcy was saying is having, alternative pathways to prove your ASL language proficiency. If a high school student like Lori's daughter took 4 years and was really proficient, instead of taking the coursework in college and paying for it, they could choose to take the language
Yeah.
assessment. It's quicker and it's faster. Or if they're in a college class and they've gone that track, 'cause they want to go into an interpreter training program, they can show language proficiency by their coursework. Or if they're a deaf person, or they're a CODA, SOTA, YOTA, and they have language proficiency, they just take the assessment. So we have at least 3 options we have identified to prove language, ASL, language proficiency.
I think what my question was, is I was hearing the 1 and 2 were not showing as proficiency. But what I think is that, yes, they might be. I think that's what we're actually saying.
Well, and I think Darcy is clarifying, like, ASL on the Slippy exams at 3 is kind of equivalent to having 2 years of formal ASL training. So if
Which is
you,
level 2.
yeah,
Okay,
200 level, yes.
Okay.
But it's another way to show that.
This is Amanda, who's speaking English, makes a question for probably Tina, actually, not that I know, hear the reader. Okay, if we say for English proficiency, high school diploma or GED, what if someone went to high school in another country and came here and got a bachelor's degree from the United States? Will that satisfy, or does it literally have to be a high school diploma or GED, or can it be or above?
This Tina. If you want that, I would definitely say that, because if they come to us and they're from out of country and they have a high school diploma, it has to be sent to accreditation to make sure it's a high school diploma equivalent to the United States.
Okay.
So please put that in.
So Amanda and I are just right there. My comment on that would be the TOEFL. Couldn't they just take the TOEFL for their English proficiency?
there's,
High school diploma or equivalent GED, accredited from out of the country, high school proficiency or diploma or the TOEFL. That would prove English proficiency.
This is me, I'm gonna speak. Correct me if I'm wrong, anyone else in the science field, I don't know that many would know what the TOEFL was to even take it, like, it's not a thing in our realm. So it's certainly a thing that could be, like, if someone had really literally nothing else, but I don't think it would even be a common
Sorry,
thing.
this is Deanna.
Yeah.
So if you're coming from out of the country, you would know what a TOEFL is. It's,
what is it?
it's an English proficiency exam.
Stand for something.
Test of
knows?
English as a foreign language.
Yes. There you go.
This is Christy. Lori and I's homework was to look exactly that, and we do have the TOEFL listed. And while I think that people, like, it may not be in our world, it is known. And I think including everything that's a possibility is important.
This is Mel. I was just gonna add for private interpreters. Maybe.
And it just, I thought she wanted to.
This Tina. What exactly, what is abbreviated, but what is it? Oh, you got what's done.
I got what it stands for.
Okay.
Test of English as a foreign language.
So what's this sort of, what would count as minimum, what score are you looking for as minimum?
Minimum score required would be an 80. For Lori's research that I'm reading off the sheet.
Yeah.
Shemeketa does the TOEFL. I mean, it's very accessible.
This is Sammy, so. Could anybody go take it? qualify? Okay.
And yes.
This is Christy. I should clarify, there's a score for internet-based, and then there's a score for paper-based. So, yeah.
No.
Uh, 80 for internet and 550 for paper. Yeah, 80 was the score for internet and 550 was for paper-based. I've not taken it, so I don't know. Yeah.
Okay, we're done.
So I just basically, the numbers that Christy just gave you, I just went around and I looked at a lot of college entrance requirements. And those numbers were basically an average of what I came across for a bunch of different colleges for bachelor programs. So that would apply, you graduated from high school, you've got that language already. Another assessment that was financially more feasible for a lot of students was the Duolingo English test, which is online, like $35. You can just pay for it and get it done. I don't know how many assessments we would add to this list, but that was one that was cheap for people to do. And 115 was an average score I came across for that.
What was that one?
Duolingo.
English.
Mhm.
Since I do it either. Okay. Are we at a good stopping point for a break?
Right now. Yeah. This is a minute, can we just do a little something you could, we can just like, just have a little thing.
That only took, what, 11 hours?
How long is the break?
30 minutes. Back into it.
Somebody has a lined piece of paper that I sent around for people to put their names and email addresses on. If you're interested, I've started a shareable document that Amanda's gonna destroy. But it might be easier.
Wait, what am I destroying?
A shareable document.
Okay, this is Sammy. And I thought I would try and recap kind of where we're at. Recap where we're at, and Amanda, maybe I want to make sure that we're capturing what you have. And I think we're gonna need some interpretation. That's how I write, so. Trust me, I write in a circle. People are like, why are we doing? So. So the first pathway that we discussed is the academic degree, and we haven't determined what that is. Maybe that's the next thing we do, maybe it needs research. The next one was the CASI exam, and then the proof of proficiency in English and Excel, and now we've come up with some of those, which I'll just go over. So proficient in English would be a high school diploma, a GED, or high school equivalent. Not sure what that would be, high school equivalent to GED.
Which pathway, the first pathway?
Two. The CASI exam.
And so that would be the first. Oh, I see.
And then proof of ASL would be proof of English language proficiency, high school diploma, GED or equivalent, out of country diploma or degree. Not sure if that's where we went. And then one way is test of English as a foreign language. Minimum 80 on online exam score, 550 on paper exam score. Something about trilingual, I'm not sure what, and duolingual exam. There's that, we can go back, proficient in ASL was the slippy.
Yeah.
So proficiency in English.
This is Amanda, I'm speaking English. For interpretation notes, students. And then correct me if I'm wrong. So the English proficiency is a high school diploma or above, high school diploma, GED or above. If you don't have that, you can demonstrate it with TEFL. TOEFL. With the scores that you said. Or a Duolingo with the scores. So those are ORs.
Right. Yeah,
And that you, if you say high school or GED or above as the first kind of criteria, then I don't think we have to deal with the out of country people, because they would be dealt with there or with the, I just lost it again, total.
would they just all be ORs?
Yeah.
Okay.
Question. Are we, what's the duo? I don't know what that is. Yes, Amanda? This is Amanda speaking. The two of them in the corner researched how to assess proficiency in English, and there's an inexpensive test called Duolingo. And it's online, and it's, if you pass this, it's the equivalent of passing a college level course. So there's the TOEFL, which is a little more laid back. Yeah.
I just want to clarify what, this is Deanna, what Amanda said, I think. We'll switch that. The Duolingo is a little more laid back and the TOEFL is more professional,
But they're gonna be either or.
either or.
Tina?
This is Tina. Before we go any further, I wanted to bring up something that I heard when I was leaving for lunch about something that's been written up on a computer. Yep.
Danny?
I want to just go back. So if I am, if I'm coming from Mexico and I have a degree in ASL, but I've never done the Duolingo, I haven't done the TOEFL, but I have a degree, a bachelor's degree, am I in? Okay,
Amanda? This is Amanda. Assuming a bachelor's degree is in the US.
No, out of country,
Bachelor's degree out of country?
from Mexico. That's,
No, then it wouldn't come from the church. Deanna?
So a bachelor's degree in the US, I was just clarifying what Amanda, this is Deanna, what Amanda said. So we're looking at English proficiency. And so I would think I just wanted to piggyback on that. If you get a bachelor's degree in another country, that doesn't necessarily give you English proficiency. However, some universities out of country do test for English proficiency, but I think it would have to have to see that transcript. But I think they would usually take the TOEFL in their country for that.
Tina, did you have anything to say? And then no?
Yeah, just real quick, to go off of that, and they're right, Sandy, it's a high school or GED in the United States. If they're coming from another country, they would have to take the TOEFL.
yeah, I got that.
Okay.
I marked it out.
No? For ASL proficiency, they could take the ASLPI and get a level of 3, correct? And then for the SLPI, what's the equivalence? Would that be? What would that be? Oh. Let me check.
Yeah, this Tina, on those certificates, when you take one of those, does it say what their score is?
This is Sandy, one more go back.
Could we hold on just a second? I mean, Dorothy is looking at, whether it's the-
Yes.
Advanced or above.
Yeah. Advanced plus, either advanced or advanced plus. Yeah, I think advanced. No, for training for the SLPI. So is he saying for the ASLPI, it would be a 3.0, that would be equivalent to the advanced of the SLPI, because they don't, for scoring SLPI has what, not numbers. Now I'm putting for advanced plus for SLPI, that's equivalent to a 4 with the ASLPI. And then it goes down from there. Darcy's saying, well, they have different levels. For example, there's intermediate plus, advanced plus, and then superior. Like superior plus, that's the scale for the SLPI. Mel is saying, well, intermediate perhaps? Or intermediate plus or advanced, Darcy's saying, because online it says intermediate plus represents advanced skill level, but not all have all standards. Sorry, you can see Darcy's hands. Here, now maybe you can just read it off the screen or Evan.
intermediate plus, intermediate, able to discuss with some confidence routine social and work topics within a conversational format with some elaboration, generally 3 to 5 sentences. Good knowledge and control of everyday basic sign language vocabulary with sign language errors and misproductions. Fair use of some sign language grammatical features and fairly good comprehension of moderate to normal signing rate. A few repetitions and rephrasing of questions may be needed. And that's intermediate. Hold on.
What about intermediate?
Advanced is able to have generally shared conversations with good spontaneous elaboration for both social and work topics. That's advanced. What about intermediate? Hold on.
What about this one?
Yeah, not this one. Yeah. Okay, advanced is able to have a generally shared conversation with good spontaneous elaboration for both social and work topics, broad sign language vocabulary knowledge, and clear, accurate production of signs and finger spelling at a normal, near normal rate. Occasional misproductions do not distract from conversational flow. Good use of many sign language grammatical features and comprehension good for normal signing rate. And then advanced plus is exhibits some superior level skills, but not all and not consistently.
Christie?
This is Christy. So I work for Columbia Regional and Portland Public instituted a bilingual stipend for people who could demonstrate proficiency in a spoken language. And so we hollered and said, hey, we have these folks. So we had to do research in regards to what was comparable. So what was comparable when we did the research in regards to spoken language for the SLPI, we said it had to be advanced, which was equivalent to an advanced mid for the spoken language assessments. Food for thought.
What do you suggest, Christy?
I'm in alignment with your thought in regards to advanced.
For the yeah.
This is Christy again, if I could just expand. However, I guess if the idea is that this is entry level provisional, we could say mid, what was the mid plus?
Intermediate plus.
Intermediate plus.
And this is Sammy, can you repeat the equivalent to spoken language? What was the number?
When we did the
Or-
research for the SLPI, it was advanced, was equivalent to the spoken language. Sorry, let me find where it just was here. Advanced mid is how PPS said you needed to pass in the spoken English assessments. The scoring was advanced mid. So when we did the comparison, SLPI was advanced. Advanced.
So just to add some of that in the
Talking about
rules now.
language like advanced mid, are you talking? Were you talking about that instead of?
Are you talking about that in for spoken language interpreters, or what are you talking about that in regards to the foreign language? Like, what are they doing?
So originally, teachers could apply for a bilingual stipend. If they met various criteria, they had to pass demonstrating proficiency. For spoken language, it was advanced mid. So in order to have an equivalent in ASL, we looked at the SLPI as one of the tools. And it came out to be advanced, seemed to be comparable with advanced mid on a spoken language.
Thank you.
This is the interpreters, we're gonna go ahead and switch. This is Mel, starting with you, your graduates from BCC, where do you feel that they should be? Right here. That's where they should be. This is Mel. So advanced is a requirement. Hold on, for medical maybe, it's 4 right now. It's 4, okay. So maybe 2 or 3 below for. So I feel like advanced plus, I feel like intermediate would be better for this. But this is for new graduates, we're talking about new graduates here. So for the provision. So a high 4, that's like. Sometimes deaf interpreters, that's what they would be getting. So I feel like we need something in between, something intermediate is where I would be. And Darcy saying, okay, Deanna.
This is Deanna. I have a question about the SLPI. And that was great comparison, sorry, speaking English is hard for me. How does it compare with the CASLI?
I don't know.
Because we want to we want an opportunity for new people to come in, but we don't want to say, oh, the CASLI, oh, way over here, down here, and then the SLPI way up here. I mean, we want to be kind of in that range, right? And I think the way I understand intermediate plus sounds like that would be a good place.
So it's hard to compare the ASLPI with the CASLI because the ASLPI is just for your ASL conversational skills. The CASLI is about knowledge required for an ASL interpreter. So it's all about the knowledge of interpreting itself. So they're completely different.
That's good to know.
Tammy?
In the rule right now, it's, for both of them. And then also in, the medical, they have level 4 or above, minimum proficiency level 4 or above.
You're saying level 4, okay. And that's for
Medical and currently for provisional in this office.
but last would probably be. Amanda. I want to support the intermediate, not the plus. Because remember, we want to open that gate, right? And part of the supervisor training development during those 5 years can include specific language about learning both English and ASL. So I'm curious, and I'm thinking about further us to open this gate. If intermediate is going to be good for the 3, if we're going to be able to mix, say that 3 is equal to intermediate for the 2 assessments. And sorry, I don't want, and I'm also thinking we don't have any data that tells us anything. So we also need to think about this as a data collection point, really like setting this minimum and like, let's take a pulse and see, you know, like Mel mentioned, you know, about the ASLPI being, like 4 something. Some people don't even get a 4 on the ASLPI. So for a hearing person to get a 4, like as a minimum standard, I mean, how many interpreters are going to be left, right? So a minimum, let's set it up, let's get some data, and then we can set up a better rule in the future using this data, just something to think about. So it seems intermediate. Mel?
So Sammy, it means the current thingy bobber of a 4.0 for provisional, the RAC is suggesting 3.
For the ASLPI. And we're now debating the intermediate for the.
I think we just agreed, decided. We're all done.
I'm following you.
Take the wins.
Are we done with this part?
No. Going back to one thing on the proficient in English. Somebody threw out something about trilingual, but I don't know what they meant by that. Could have just been a side note. So I wanted to just bring that back. And then I had two more things under proficient in ASL. Trilingual, which is a side note.
Go ahead, Amanda. This is Amanda, I speak English. I think trilingual is covered in all of that. There's nothing different that a trilingual covered.
In all of them.
In all of what we already said, high school or above, no Duolingo, TOEFL, TOEFL.
So no need to say it.
This is Edward. I agree, it does not need to be said. There are occasions when someone, let's say from Panama. There is Panamanian Sign Language, but mostly they use ASL. So a person could come from Panama, prove their English proficiency through TOEFL. They could take whatever assessment for ASL and pass it.
Okay.
And they would be in.
Now asking, is there any, are we assessing trilingual all our languages at this point? I mean, there's no trilingual certification.
There is BEI, Texas BEI assesses all three languages.
So there's nothing under the CASLI or a mono, whatever.
No,
So, as a moment in time, how progressive does Oregon want to be?
Amanda and then Deanna. So this is Amanda. I agree. How progressive. So if we want to include trilingual interpreters, I think we could add that if a third language user is working in their language, they need to demonstrate competency, blah. So we could rely on like Spanish has something, but like whatever their third language is, or is it a third, like how are we gonna do it if it's a third sign language? Like how are we deciding what this, how to evaluate and what to evaluate for this third language? So are we just doing a blanket statement for like a trilingual interpreter? Because this third, what I mean, we want to support that, but also at the same time, how to support it? Deanna?
So this is Deanna. I think it's for the third language, it's already laid out for us for if it's spoken language, right? Why don't we just don't reinvent the wheel, just pull over what we have from the Oregon Health Authority, HCIs, and utilize, refer to HCI, and we might as well add it in because it's already there.
I would like to add to that, this is Darcy. So you're referring to, what did you say, HCI, right? So HCI is for, that's the spoken language, right? But it doesn't really say, it doesn't, that ASL is not included in those.
This is Deanna.
So, right, so, I mean.
This is Deanna.
Screen, second sign language.
Right?
Right, so for the third language, so and first language, second language, ASL being one of those two, and then the third language being a foreign language, maybe Spanish, Russian, Mandarin, whatever that may be, that language, that third language could be, the regulations would fall under the HCI through the Oregon Health Authority, is my suggestion.
This is Darcy. Yes, right, that's for spoken language only, for a third foreign spoken language. Okay, just wanted to clarify that it wasn't for a foreign sign language. Okay, who was next? I'm not sure who was next. Amanda or Tammy, or is it regards to what?
I'm just thinking, I might have thrown a monkey wrench in something and I shouldn't have, and I heard something and just, let's forget it, because I think what, Edwin said is, yeah, they might have that, but they're gonna come through and they're gonna take a test and to prove that they're English proficient, we're gonna move on. I apologize for the side notes.
Yes, Amanda. This is Amanda. I agree with you, Sammy. And I also just wanted to throw out there, we also could use this as an opportunity to gather data on trilingual interpreters in, Oregon, what tends to be a third language. Do we actually need to screen for that, kind of depending on what the language of our region is, So we could use this as an opportunity for growth for rules maker. Mel? I know Sammy is upset. Through the wrench in, but I am curious if an agency said the trilingual interpreter for medical, let's say, I think that's, yes, for medical, working with a deaf person, maybe it's a kid that's signing and the parent speaks Spanish. So they throw in a trilingual interpreter to do both, be able to interpret the child and the parent. Are that trilingual interpreter certified in both? So for that medical interpreter, do they have medical in certification for both ASL and in this situation for the Spanish interpreter? So the CCHI, do they have to pass that plus pass the ASL medical requirements as well? Like, do they need to have both? That could be a loophole. Oh, it is a loophole. Thank you for clarifying. That is a loophole, and that could be a problem. So is my Spanish good enough for the parents? Am I just neglecting that? So that could kind of be a sticky situation.
I don't
So I'm
understand.
so sorry.
So, Sammy, what did you say? I don't really understand how this is applying to
Either.
provisional licenses.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't apply to provisional at all. Except, let's put a pin in it to medical, I guess, but we do have trilingual interpreters in the state of Oregon. We have people that speak both languages.
Yeah.
And if they're representing themselves as trilingual, we have to assess all languages that they're representing. That's the question.
What you've said so far is yes. They need to represent two. What you said.
Deanna?
Just for provisional right now, but for more advanced, I think it is very important that we address that in the medical and legal.
This will be the first time I've heard of this in this arena. I mean, I know that there's trilingual interpreters, but I haven't heard you guys say that that you had intended to somehow assess those additional languages. I haven't heard that. It sounds like there's things that you guys can assess that. You can do that.
It's already in place.
Who was first? Christy
This is Chris,
or Lori? I don't know.
Christy. But we know a provisional interpreter is not interpreting in the medical or legal setting.
Correct.
And therefore, it seems like we do not need to focus on trying to assess that third language. When we get to the medical legal, we need to add that as a piece of evidence for being qualified.
Lori, do you have anything? So are we still on the second conflict? Kathleen? Back at you, where are we? Amanda,
Yeah, go ahead. I'm just gonna speak English for Sammy. What do you need next?
Darcy went back and forth about level 2 classes being 2 years and then that being making someone proficient in ASL if they had level 2 coursework. And then somebody also said 4 years of high school ASL.
I think we agreed. What did we agree?
Didn't agree, that's why I'm asking.
We agreed.
But there's 2 of you.
Yeah.
Years.
No, I
of
don't
high
care about
school. Maybe let's do some clarification. So here in Oregon, we have dual credit students that take ASL classes for high school students. And at the end, it can be a 200 level is equivalent to 4 years of high school ASL. And that is 2 years of college. So those things have been shown to be equivalent here in Oregon. 4 years of high school is equivalent to a 200 level class in college.
This is Amanda, so I just want to make sure, because you said it a couple times about ASL two kind of thing, so 200 level ASL class, okay? Just make sure that that 200.
I have 3, I know what. That's all I have.
Oh, what is, oh.
Have you got there? We haven't finished pathway 3.
We're still on the third, right?
We're on pathway 2, but pathway 3 has a piece of pathway. Pathway 3 has a piece of pathway 2.
Let's hold on.
This is Christie. I think I'm confused. I thought we had just ticked off everything for pathway 3. Have we addressed everything in pathway 3?
As long as everyone's comfortable with 40 hours. Sign language interpretation. Period.
We're gonna switch interpreters. Hold on.
But no, I was doing pathway 2.
15 is one. Sorry.
Did we establish a Castley score to demonstrate proficiency in ASL?
Oh, you did not.
Here's the knowledge exam.
I know nothing about that, so I'm just trying to take notes on what we decided, but
So for pathway,
I'm speaking English.
It's proof of having passed.
So for the pathway 2, that has language requirement both English and ASL, it's the same as pathway 3.
okay.
this is Mel, the Cosley knowledge exam. Yeah, okay.
This is Caitlin. So the Casley knowledge exam isn't assessing proficiency in either English or ASL. It's just interpretation knowledge.
Oh,
That's it.
There is-
And there's a pass, no pass. There's not a score.
And it happens, the test is in sign language. So if you can't comprehend what is being signed. Not right.
That's right. Amanda. This is Amanda. Yes, yes, yes. And the CASI has 2 parts to it. I would suggest that we say you have to pass both parts in order to get that provisional license. It's possible to pass one and not pass the other one, and you can retake one or the other. But you need to have both parts pass both in order to get the provisional license is what I'm gonna say. You would need to have a pass full CASI, so to say, to get that provisional license. Darcy here. So, in relation to Amanda's comment, currently there's a gap test. Is that what you're talking about? So they don't have that any longer. Now they have a new test, it's Pasley Generalist Knowledge Exam. That's the newly established exam from here on, and I can double check with Pasley just to make sure that they don't have that gap exam any longer.
for those who have taken it prior, for those who haven't taken it, now they have a new standard, and that's called a CASD Generalist Knowledge Exam. And that includes deaf and hearing interpreters can take that, but it doesn't measure their effectiveness at interpreting. It's just their receptive skills, and they can understand a question in American Sign Language, and they understand a question in English. If you do, then you have passed that test. Now, there are two things. So for the pathway 2, if you can pass the knowledge exam, does that mean you have satisfied that requirement for signing proficiency? Is that considered proof of having that receptive skill? Darcy's saying, I guess so. Mel's saying, so then you wouldn't need to take another exam, you could just take that test. Mel's thinking forward. So another point. We know that CASLI is constantly in flux. So the language we could use could be currently, the current CASLI, if that has been passed. Because I think they've changed it 2 times in the past decade or so. So if we say, add additional language for the current CASLI exam to be passed. Caitlin? This is Caitlin speaking. So they are still providing the GAP exam at the moment. I just took it 2 weeks ago myself. So there's that. So in the future, they won't have that any longer. There's a second thing I was going to say. That yes, the receptive aspect to that exam is okay, but you don't have your hands up, you don't have an expressive partial of that, so it's only really half of your ASL skill set. Percy's saying, so Caitlin just shared that we do still have that exam. So people who might have taken it 2 or 3 years ago for that knowledge portion can take the GAP, and then the newer applicants can take the generalist knowledge exam. So you might need to have both CASLI, what was that first part that you said, Caitlin? The knowledge written for knowledge. Yeah, the knowledge exam with the GAP test. Have both of those or the generalist. So have the 2 or have the 1, so we can figure out the right way to do that.
This is Sammy. Could I just get the 40 hours and skip all that? I mean, if I already have it, cool. But if I don't have to, I can just get my 40 hours and take make sure I'm proficient in English or ASL. I mean, I'm wanting to understand.
Yeah.
So I want to understand, also clarify. So what we're saying is, for the CASLI exam, because it sounds like it could change here and there, is, currently as this rule is written, you can take the CASLI exam plus the GAP or the generalist, one or the other. Right, okay, good.
I kind of think that pathway 2, the first criteria, you should pass the knowledge or ASL guide, the other 2, why don't we just drop those? So as long as you have that exam, then you have met that criteria, and then there's the other pathways we would keep as well. So currently, how the statute is, we can have it phrased that way. Amanda. This is Amanda. So Mel, do you mean that for pathway 2, that CASLI exam will be the only criteria required just to have that test score? Yes. Deanna?
So you're saying to drop the submit proof of efficiency proficiency in the English language and submit proof of proficiency in the ASL language and just have the CAS.
My understanding is you take the exam through an interpreter training program. It's expensive, is that worth it? Interpreters will clarify. What I believe is that for like RID, you had to have an educational degree in order to take that exam. Is that no longer a requirement? So an individual would have to pay about $500 to take that exam. That means they have some training prior to that. And then you wouldn't have to pay if you had prior training during the preferred training program. Is that right? Person, I'll have to look at Amanda here. So SLI has two parts to it, the knowledge exam, which is not required to have a degree in order to take it. Anyone can take that regardless. Even for the performance aspect, you are required to have a bachelor's degree. And it is expensive. And just an FYI for everybody, the pass rate for the knowledge exam is 59%. So that means people who have already taken training, already taken all of the prerequisites pass at a 100% rate. That's pretty regular. So that's a good screening tool for us to again collect that data.
I just want to clarify under pathway 2 that it is still the Catholic Generous Knowledge Exam, and then proof of being proficient in the English language and proof of being proficient in ASL, or did we take away those last two pieces? It's all the same, those three. Just the one. Okay, those are just Catholic Generous Knowledge Exam.
Lori.
I thought you said that the knowledge exam doesn't indicate any proof of performance, so why would we want that in isolation?
This is Amanda. So the exam is not a conversational analysis of your language, but it is an exam of your use of language for learning and reporting information, responding. So you don't sign or speak in that, but it's just a way to show your knowledge of both languages by taking that exam through your mostly receptive understanding of it. So that's the majority regardless.
This is Lori, but I'm still not understanding why that would be enough to be in a pathway to itself when we have no information about whether that person knows sign. They might have some interpreting knowledge, but they don't. Did I miss something?
Okay. This is Amanda. So the exam uses both ASL and English within the exam. Questions are signed. If you don't know sign language, you will fail.
Oh, I missed that part.
Yep. Got it. Okay, now. Same comment as Amanda. This is Darcy. I want to clarify a question. So about the criteria A, B, and C. Let's say 50% of the exam is done in English. You have English phrases and you've got like multiple choice and you pick one. And then in ASL, you have a sign prompt like a video prompt. And then each multiple choice option is also signed that you have to choose from to see if you comprehend. So it is challenging for both deaf and hearing individuals for receptive skills, in ASL. And interpreter switch.
I'm ready to have that copy.
I think so.
Copy readings we got right.
Yes, so 2 is just passage of the CASLI generalist knowledge exam, and pathway 3 is 40 hours of education, training in sign language interpretation, and proficiency in English, which we went over, proficiency in ASL, and then the next one is pathway 4, non-ASL interpreters.
Can I just clarify that the CASLI, to pass that, there's 2 options. The first one is the knowledge plus the gap, and the second one is the generalist exam.
Do you want two exams?
There,
Or.
or, right, because there's two opportunities. The first one is the knowledge and the gap, because as I understood, the gap is probably going to be going away, but the people who have already taken that, if they have that, then they will qualify. But once that gap goes away, then they'll have to, the only option will be to take the generalist exam. So it's, the way I understand, we are putting both of those in there as or.
So this is now, so under 2, because the CADLI is a live testing body that is responsive to our practice profession, its exams shift and the names of those exams shift. Keeping this broad is going to help us. We don't have to keep adding and changing things. So we said something like CADLI exam, submit proof of having completely passed a current whole costly generalist exam that would, like school 1 test has 2 parts. 1 test only has 1 part. So like wording that to say whatever the current iteration of this test is, that you've completely passed all portions of it is kind of what we're trying to capture. The names are going to shift. It's going to change in the next 5, 10 years. Tomorrow.
I think in requirements for the current generalist supervisory, it says something about RID or its following organization, NAD or its following organization. So using similar language would fit the CASA exam.
In the law or in the rule?
I don't remember which.
It's the law, I think.
I think so.
So what do we mean by non-ASL interpreters? Pathway 4 is for non-ASL interpreters, then who's this for? I know. Like Mel was saying, they DIs. But they are interpreters, so they would fall one of those categories. Right?
No, no. I was holding my head, reading, trying to process. I got none.
Okay. So this is a question. Are there interpreters, so there are other sign languages in other countries. And if a person comes to Oregon knowing only that sign language, then who would interpret for that individual? And that person would be the license.
You go.
I'll answer Heather. I believe this was to address that is often like 95 of majority of hearing interpreters were interpreting from spoken English or written English into a sign language. There are deaf interpreters that we've been talking about that you've heard who are most of their work is interpreting from one sign language to another sign language. They're taking sign language from, like myself, a hearing interpreter. I signed to Darcy. And let's say Darcy is from Peru and was raised here and knows multiple languages or just has language skills to interpret. It can bridge or relay from what I provide linguistically to Darcy to this other deaf consumer. So right now at PCC, we have deaf people from refugee camps, from the Karen tribes, and I'm using deaf interpreters in my classroom as a relay for my hearing interpreters who are hearing what the teachers say. They're taking it and they're rendering it into another sign language. And that process is why we so desperately need these deaf interpreters. Sometimes the interpreter could be from another country, or sometimes they're raised here in the United States and have gone to deaf schools or have an generation of deaf family and have more depth of language, of American Sign Language than I do as a second language. There's the deaf interpreter makeup is very wide and vast, and they're serving a multiple of consumers. And how to capture that has been why I was like, we need a specialty license to like kind of fit all that in there. But if you want to look at
They're
that
not
with
deaf.
four,
And but they're from another country.
if they're not deaf, and if that would be our trilingual interpreters that we were talking about potentially.
Amanda. This is Amanda. So, no, exactly, that's exactly what I was thinking. So, what are their numbers? How is that different than being a trilingual interpreter? If you think of who's working with you right now, your situation you're just explaining. Who wouldn't fit in one of those other three categories? Who doesn't fit categories? Not those one. Darcy? This is Darcy speaking. Amanda, I guess I can maybe answer your question. I can think of maybe 2 or 3 deaf interpreters who themselves don't go into any of those 3 categories. And this is really, no, just because maybe they were born in another country, they have the sign fluency from their native country, they come here, they learn ASL, they become skilled ASL users. And they can keep up with hearing interpreters and understand hearing interpreters, and then they can work into, they can be really great deaf interpreters with no formal trainings. So there's several that I can think of. Even in the medical situation, we need those people, we need those interpreters. And so I think that is the person that I like with that. Is a deaf interpreter, and I can think of 2 of your hands, so. Yes, thank you.
Do those people, so I think. Even if they're from another country, they come here, they learn ASL. Did I hear that accurately? Are they proficient in English or no? No. Okay.
So I was thinking, I'm just trying to follow the example of.
Language is a
Language of lesser diffusion. The language of lesser diffusion. So
Give me an example, like, when you just give another community, that doesn't recommend, that person from another, say Russian. We don't have a lot of Russian sandwich just in the US. So, and we don't have a need for that either. It's not a widely used language, but at the same time, there is the need to use variation. So you have the lesser diffusion of, you know, you've got a medical situation. Maybe you can show proof of a letter from, you know, a community member, a respected community member, to show proficiency in that way. I don't know, I'm just kind of thinking out loud here, but again, it doesn't necessarily fit. Versus this, it's more of a. Sorry. So you can actually refer to somebody else. What I just said, so. Next, Deanna.
So Mexican Sign Language is different than American Sign Language. Okay. I really believe, truly believe this should not be in the provision. It should be a separate category, a specialty license to encompass all of these special and requirements, being from another country, deaf interpreting, the refugees. This is all a growing and building one on the other, and it just cannot be in this category.
This is Sammy, if you could tell us all of those things, then we can capture it and then we can try to figure out where it goes. Is it a specialty? Is it an exception? Is it an extraordinary circumstance?
This is Deanna. It is a specialty. If you're coming from another country,
That's what I'm asking.
yes.
If you could tell us all the things and then we'll look at the law and try to figure out where that's.
Specialty, for example, Mexican Sign Language, you're not going to be proficient in American Sign Language. Refugees coming in who are deaf, who speak languages such as Karen, Swahili, Somali, other refugee languages. Currently, we are bringing in refugees from Cuba, Venezuela, and I want to say Argentina. That may not be right. And they have a different culture and a different expression in their language. So deaf interpreters. Deaf interpreters it is a separate thing. It just because you're a deaf interpreter does not mean you're provisional, that you qualify for a provisional license. They have a separate set of talents and what's the word, talents, but skills, thank you. They have a separate set of skills, and it should not be equated with a basic interpreter, is what I believe.
Can you expand on that?
Yes, and then just to add, that will also fall into the trilingual interpreters where, you know, certain, I mean, Edwin's skill set is far above my skill set, because of the different languages that he speaks. I'm just saying that those special skills should not be equated with a provisional license.
For those one-offs. Maybe it doesn't fit necessarily for college classrooms, but maybe we can call it like a specialty, you know, for visitors to come, it's special situations, like refugees. Exceptions. I mean, we have deaf interpreters, we'll have those new deaf interpreters just coming into the field, they're just starting their work. But we also have deaf interpreters that don't do that. The deaf interpreters who do the other thing, that. So this category that we were just talking about is one-offs, like we have the language of like the diffusion. Meaning that those are those like exceptions? So they wouldn't necessarily fit the provisional, but they would, and some of them would go for that provision. Because, that's what we're talking about, they still have to take some exams. So. That's going to be very effective, but I'm trying to figure out what is fourth category, just feel like we almost need to get rid of it, because it doesn't really figure, this pathway doesn't necessarily feel provisions. You're ready for it?
Mm-mm.
And then what happens if they come here and then they're interpreting all the time?
We're gonna take up the problem.
Can you restate the zero question again, please? So we have somebody come in under that, and then they continue to keep interpreting, and they are interpreting every day, all day. They don't still have to have a license, you're just going to give them this specialness.
No. So this, I'm say it again. Deaf interpreters who might be working in a variety of settings. My deaf person from the Karen tribe who has so much trauma is going to the doctor for trauma wounds, is going to mental health because they were in a refugee camp for 15 years. They're seeking college classes and they're going through the immigration status, taking those stupid classes so they can get citizenship, right? So like this one person is in 5 or 6 different settings. And that's just one example, right? So the one-offs have high impact and they're in our systems, need to be used. Most of the time, we are looking for deaf interpreters, certified deaf interpreters if we can. There's 4 in the state of Oregon, 2 have full-time jobs, 2 are actually practicing full-time. We are heavily relying on people who have mastery in this ability, like Darcy, who has been doing this and teaching interpreters for over 30 years. Who is not certified, but they are not provisional. They need to be able to have access to the medical and legal settings. And so however box we put them in, what they're doing is legal and medical interpreting and community-based interpreting with or without a hearing interpreter.
Generous. Yes, ma'am. This is Amanda speaking. I was thinking about your comment that you made before, Darcy, and also you know, just recently, about that group of people that have a lot of experience in the community. Why can't we set up a grandfather clause? Oh, I see Sam, I see you saying no, right? No, okay. I'm reading. But could we grandfather them in? So you're saying there's no formal education, but they must have some kind of training, mentorship, something like that, where they've gotten some training, some feedback from being out in these community settings. So maybe they don't have college credits, but you know, they can't magically just do the work that they're doing. They do have some kind of training. They work with a mentor, or why can't we count that? And I agree with you now, no, they would not be considered provisional, that's not appropriate. They're at an advanced level as a generalist. So they have a lot of experience and they're the novice interpreters that just come into the field, sure, provisional seems like an appropriate path for them to get more training, but for the people that we're referring to here, I don't consider them as provisional. No?
Do not want to open this can of worms again. And I'm sorry.
Making any decisions today.
Not making, I agree with what Amanda is saying. And again, we're trying to fit in the specialty of deaf interpreters and hearing a license and a system that we basically for hearing interpreters, because currently they're 95% of the workforce. If that makes sense. But we're kind of in the field of working with people who, you know, are under the ADA, who have disabilities, a protected class. Now we're like creating a system as an afterthought
which is why it's painful for me to talk about it, trying to fit in deaf interpreters. We didn't create a system from the get-go that wrote in deaf interpreters. So now we're trying to go back in and kind of add them in. It feels like to me, like a lot of this formal education, these systems, I like them. And I think the field of deaf interpreters can have its own license. It can have its own pathway, and that's okay.
I agree.
Because it is so different, it is radically different. They come across education, training, schooling, and upbringing and language differently than hearing interpreters. There, and I know the West Coast, there's zero curriculum for deaf interpreters specifically. We have language neutral, and we have for hearing interpreters. We don't have any for deaf interpreters. And so keeping it as open and as general as possible makes sense to me. And if we need a specialty license to do that, to open those doors, that might just be the quickest and easiest path.
Why can pathway 3 not work for our deaf interpreters?
Again, because they're in provisional. It's kind of Amanda's point. Is it a brand new deaf interpreter who we want to have go through this structure? But what are we gonna do with the 15 deaf interpreters who are out there currently working?
That's not what we're worried about, though. We're talking about provision. So if we talk about deaf interpreters who are coming into the field, just like a provisional hearing interpreter, why would pathway number 3 not work?
It would work if we want to put them in a pathway that is structured and costs money. You know what I mean? It's a whole different system. I don't know how to articulate this any better than I have, you guys.
But in this,
Yeah, oh, go ahead, Jenny.
our box is the provisional box. So new people, fresh, I think that what you're saying is true, but I don't know that it's in this provisional box. Unless we're moving to a new box, which we could be, I don't know.
Say that again?
Like, if we're, what you're saying is begin with provisional, so new
Right.
people in the field,
Right,
would it be somebody who is
already doing the
15
job,
years or
right?
whatever? the
That's,
field
but
is
we're
at?
not talking about that.
Right. Exactly, that's
yeah.
all I'm saying, just
Yeah.
reiterating.
Okay.
That I'm understanding. I think there's a spot for that, but I don't know that it's in our provisional box.
Right.
Maybe in our generalist box, so.
So what I think, and what I think I'm hearing from you too, is this pathway 4 is not necessary in the provisional license. Because our brand new deaf interpreters could possibly follow pathway 3 to get in. And then later we can talk about a specialty license for our other trained and skilled interpreters that don't fall into these categories.
Gonna make sure I understood a few points. In relation to the special situations such as a deaf person who is raised from another country that is proficient in that country's sign language as well in ASL. That person needs to be able to interpret in a medical and legal setting, and that person is going to have lots and lots and lots and lots of hours of lived experience. Similarly, a deaf person proficient in such as Mexican Sign Language or another country's sign language that's not ASL and is not proficient in ASL. That type of person would need to be able to interpret in a medical and legal setting. And that person would have lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of hours of lived experience. Thank you.
I was going to clarify something again. For the third pathway, this is Darcy speaking. Or was that separate? Was that for the third pathway that you were just saying, Heather?
Can you say it one more time?
Yeah, okay, again, do you mind repeating your comment again, Heather, because I'm trying to figure out if your comments relate to the third pathway or some other.
So this is Heather. My comment did not relate to the third pathway. It is a special situation that we have not put into the provisional box. Something that we're just gathering information on for future discussion.
Now, I think if a pathway for deaf interpreters isn't, whatever we decide, I think currently a new deaf interpreter could fall under pathway 1, 2, or 3 as they currently stand. Yes. Except I think maybe the training of 40 hours. I like it, but at the same time, that could be a big ask for somebody who's only working 40 hours a year as a deaf interpreter.
Yes, this is Amanda. What does qualified mean for a deaf interpreter? So if we don't want to open this can of worms perhaps, but okay, we're talking about provisional, we're good on that, but then let's just leave that and visit, let's just go over to the deaf interpreter world for a moment here. What are their qualifications, their experiences? No, we're provisional, Melissa. No, just deaf interpreter land. Not provisional. Councilor Darcy. Darcy speaking well for interpreters, deaf interpreters. Think about the trainings. We don't have a minimum number. Throw that out for training. So what's left? I mean, it's like lived experience, really. Deaf people mostly, not all. But we interpret for classmates and friends. We grow up, this is what we do. As we're getting older, it's nothing formal. As in, legal situations, medical situations. Of course, we do have to learn, we not specific to those things, but just, everyday interpreting that, we have a lot of experience with that, so I think that's an equivalent. But I'm not sure how to do that equivalent. This is Amanda who will follow up. If I'm deaf, sure, you go ahead and interpret. Does that mean I'm qualified because we're looking at here? Well, that's my question. What does it mean to be qualified in experience in order to be a deaf interpreter? Is it just being deaf? Yeah.
Which leads me to my can of worms, which is we could have a number of people qualify themselves as being a deaf interpreter who might be hard of hearing, who aren't fluent in sign, who didn't have that lived experience, but if it's easier to make it to get licensure and check a box, they're going to take advantage of that. So I think it's getting into a icky place, but how are we defining what a deaf interpreter is? And if maybe there is an existing definition that I don't know about.
I'll just run a follow-up real quick. I did do a little research, a couple other states, good play deaf interpreter over in Idaho, Stephen Stubbs. They passed licensure 5 years ago. For deaf interpreters, not certified deaf interpreters, but deaf interpreters. And they had it where you had to have so many, like I say, 20 hours of training and 2 letters of recommendation from the community. One from a hearing interpreter at the generalist level above, and from an agency. Within 5 years, they changed that. As a rural state, those standards were too high. They changed it to 4 hours of training or 6 hours of training on ethics and something else, and 1 letter. And then, every year they had to have so many hours of training and it kind of fleeced it. If people weren't attending the training, they lost their license. And the trainings were free. And Deanna?
Thank you. This is Deanna. So another reason why the deaf and specialty interpreting should not be in this provisional licensure. Because you get someone who is not skilled and qualified in ASL. And they just, well, I'll just be a deaf interpreter. I mean, it needs to be separated and because we need to address all of those details. And I think if we separate that out, we can be more empathetic, and we can, in the cost, in the trainings, the living experience, and so again, as I reiterate, my very strong opinion is that the deaf interpreter specialty license should be separate and should not be included in the provisional. As an add-on, this is Deanna, sorry, I just want to add that I just,
Question for you, Deanna.
yes, ma'am.
Do you feel licensure for deaf interpreter needs to be its whole thing from the top down for all licensures without the provisional, just in like medical, generalist, legal, you feel like that would be a whole new thing?
I do, I do.
Thank you for clarifying that. Amanda. This is Amanda. I lost my thought, hold on. Just a second. Okay, I just wanted to emphasize that we were visiting in deaf interpreter land, we weren't talking about provisional at all. And I feel like we need to close provisional down. I feel like provisional is good. I feel like we need to get a check mark on our side. And we're prematurely celebrating, like, I could be prematurely celebrating before lunch, and now I did that dance, but now I'm like, okay, Sammy, what is missing in the provisional?
Nothing.
Okay.
Just let you guys talk. So you just gotta talk.
So are we getting rid, are we getting rid of that fourth pathway?
At this point, I've moved it out off of the list.
That, yeah,
This may be a good stopping spot. So we can maybe go over fiscal impact for about 10 minutes if you want to. We can always revisit that another time. But here's public comment. And I think you guys took care of all of your tasks. I think. Let's see, Christy and Lori will research how to determine if an applicant is proficient in English. And what HLO would need with the proficiency. You asked that, right? You asked if there was a certificate that made the grade, okay. Nissa and Amber. So they're not here. Natalie and Amanda.
What was I doing?
Research 40 hours of sign language, but it sounds like it's just 40 hours of sign language interpretation. Excellent. Darcy and Natalie, this was a side note. Research the requirements for determining proficiency in.
Researching, comparing the spoken language.
Yes.
Requirements.
make sure that they were equivalent, like, so what we had, what they were saying, like it's separate for deaf and providers, like the other thing. So now we kind of have to lead out and go from there. We have to check out, for student skills, and I think that's going to be important. And maybe it's something parallel with spoken languages.
So yeah, that's. Yeah, we're good. So
Did I miss the
I mean, that's a whole other can of worms, and I don't know if you guys have time for today.
Who's that chat? Sorry, Mel, what'd you say?
Thought I had.
I don't
did
have
it.
that on here.
I did.
We did.
Okay, I thought you did.
She didn't write it down.
It's gonna be good for next.
It's.
I don't have it.
I just want to comment that I think we did such a great job on the provisional, that I think from here going forward, we have a base and a foundation, and we'll just add on that, and I don't think it'll be as difficult.
Everybody ready for public comment? At this time, the Board of Sign Language Interpreters Rules Advisory Committee will now hear public and interested parties' feedback. Members of the public, please wait.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I thought we were going to talk about fiscal impact and then move to public comment. Are we
I
not
mean,
having that?
if you, yes, you can do that.
Okay, sorry.
Sorry.
I'm just noting the time. It's 1:30, so we do have a little bit of time. We're going to make the most of our day.
We don't have an end time, so we go all day. I don't have any.
Yeah, free was our. You had initiated that we would talk about the fiscal
What would
impact.
the fiscal impact be on the rules that you wrote today?
Oh. Okay, that wasn't clear, so we are happy for some guidance.
Well, I'm gonna assume that taking the CASLE exam will cost you money. And I would. There could be cost to 40 hours of education and training. Could be free, could be a lot of money. Fill in the gaps, GED, I believe, costs money. Any type of testing, I'm assuming costs money. You'll have to pay a license fee, which you'll have here. Let me see.
So pathway one, the interpreter education, that's. I don't know if that is what you mean, but like getting a degree, you have to pay tuition and all of this stuff. I don't know.
Sammy, can you provide more information, context for all of us? What exactly are you asking us to give you input on? To what end?
I'll just read it off for you.
Great.
Are any state agencies likely to be economically affected by the rule changes? If yes, which ones?
Amanda.
This is Amanda, you'll get licensing fees. Right, okay.
From the bed.
Yeah.
Hi. Or we're gonna Justice Department.
Caitlin.
This is Caitlin speaking. Are we just talking about the rules that we made today that will be, okay, so we're medical and Department of Ed are not gonna be affected by this rules, okay. Cool.
Next one is units of local government likely to be economically affected by this rule change. If yes, which ones?
This is Amanda. Say it again, local agents, because I'm thinking like Western Oregon University and Portland Community College who offer interpreter education programs. People may be incentivized to take those programs in order to get licensure. And we're a state entity. I don't know that PCC is considered a state entity or a county entity, but
Are you asking me?
I'm asking if that fits that question.
No, municipal local government.
Okay, no.
That might be cities, if the city needed to bring in an interpreter during a public meeting, they have to pay for it. And they're. Yeah, original could work in that situation with the supervisor, so something like that. A lot of this I write,
Okay,
a lot of this I write. But you guys giving like feedback on industry stuff that I wouldn't know about.
yeah. Gotcha.
Is that helpful?
Yeah.
So a fiscal impact is a piece that we have to write whenever you propose rules. And so we kind of ask it as we go along, so it doesn't become overwhelming, but it is fluid, it changes. A lot of them, like state agencies, like I said, I will put a lot of this in, and then you guys give me like industry stuff. You can read it in the proposed rules, it is in there.
So, the thing is, like, I'll make it clear, as we establish licensures and we put in, credentials that some people who are currently working will not qualify for, we will experience potentially, for sure, a shortage of licensed qualified interpreters. And the fiscal impact is the demand is gonna go up and interpreters might raise their rates because there's gonna be a shortage.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think that's in the fiscal impact.
I think you're right on.
The one I already wrote.
I didn't even read it. You're good.
Sorry, I don't think consider this.
It's Sammy, this is Mel. Sammy has already captured that there. That might. A shortage of interpreters for the fees.
And then it also could, this directly also could impact looking at pathway one, educational interpreter programs and graduates. We're comparing that with, pathway three, the educational training, that 40 hours. Someone might, decide not to go into a formal education ITP program, interpreter training program, and just use their college ASL classes or their high school ASL classes and do those, 40 hours. So that also could could increase the number of provisional interpreters and lower, the community college and university will have people going into those, formal education programs. They might decide that this 40-hour training is faster way into the profession. So that's a little concerning. And so that's a lot of responsibility on the supervisor. So that's something to think about. And because many of us, don't have the linguistic background, deaf culture background that doesn't really apply to, the supporting field. So, maybe they won't have these great fluent ASL skills. And they just keep getting their license renewed. So there could just be, there might be less number of people, jumping into their general license and more people coming into the provisional and staying there. So I guess that's something just to kind of look back and think about the bigger picture of things, like maybe if we're having more, there's gonna be maybe more variety in this provisional group. There might be more deaf objections, complaints from our deaf community. So I don't know, that's just something, because it's not necessarily equivalent, but just something to think about and just throw out there. Go ahead, Deanna.
Thank you. This is Deanna, and anytime an interpreter is affected fiscally, they raise their rates, then the agencies raise their rates, and then their clients, who are local government, schools, et cetera, the agency will raise their rates to those clients. So that will also be a fiscal impact in the community.
Interpreter switch.
Heather? So with the focus and effort in the provisional rule to bring the qualification down to a place where people can enter the field, does that have a fiscal impact? Will more people be able to come in? Will more people be able to access a livelihood?
This is Amanda. I think potentially yes, and potentially building on what Darcy said. When the gates are open, more people are gonna come in, potentially access a livelihood. Also potentially not do well and have complaints filed or those kinds of things. So they'll also be weeded out at that level from supervisory or from clientele or like those kinds of things. So the gates will open. And even if, like Darcy was saying, someone thinks the 40 hours is less challenging, less expensive, all those things, than going to get a interpreter education, they may find it a harder, longer path. One would hope as an interpreter educator that that's a harder, longer path. But so yeah, I think yes, and there might be more growing pains, which is fine. Yeah, that's part of the process.
My concerns aren't necessarily a fiscal impact, but I do think that we're gonna have situations where people who are qualified to be supervisors decide not to be supervisors, because if we're requiring so much supervision with so many people potentially who are provisional, they're gonna be like, oh, I don't want one more person bugging me about helping them. I'm just gonna be a generalist. My other concern is due to the cost of the licensure, we're going to have people who are currently able to interpret in a variety of settings saying, I'm not paying for one more license, so I'm just going to get a license in the one area that I do the most work in and stick with that.
The other part of provisional license, we didn't touch on this because we haven't explained what supervisory is yet. But as we get more people in, as we cast the wider net, they're gonna be paying in theory maybe for supervision, so that would be a cost out, but also a cost in. You know, there'll be this, there's money happening. To pay for that supervision.
My last name is Olson.
Can you spell that?
V is in victory, OGELSON.
We ready for public comment? This time,
This is the interpreter speaking. That projected us.
how are you?
We'll project on the laptop.
No.
I don't know laptop knowledge.
I'll say.
That's. She can't just call us.
Thank you.
Well, they're in front of it, so it would involve them moving.
Right.
And then turning on the projector.
Yes, it's fine. If I understand, I'll go around to the laptop.
At this time, the Board of Sign Language Interpreters Rules Advisory Committee will now hear public and interested parties' feedback. Members of the public, please wait until you've been recognized. Once recognized, please state your name and affiliation to the committee for the record.
Sean Sloan is the only one that messaged me, but whoever else wants to would need to raise their hand. But Sean Sloan can go for it if he's ready.
Yes, my name is Sean Sloan, and I graduated from Western Oregon University. One of the recent developments by CASLI has been modifying the NIC test to reflect real-world interpreting knowledge. This is seen as a significant step forward. However, it also highlights the challenge of acquiring the thousands of hours of real-life experience necessary to pass these revised assessments without negatively impacting the community. I believe there are actionable steps the board could take to address the dilemma.
Start your scripted again, please.
Sorry, I'll actually just improvise off of the top of that, if you don't mind, because that is a little too fast to read out loud. Sorry about that. I feel the new CASLI tests being revised to focus on real-world interpreting knowledge means that the academic knowledge is devalued, which I understand and appreciate. However, gaining that real-world experience is really a huge challenge if you don't have an opportunity to get hands up for thousands of hours. I feel there's a lot of parallels between getting a license as a pilot compared to getting a license as an interpreter. Pilots have to emphasize the number of hours they have of flight time, and they're required to work with a co-pilot who's experienced. I think in similar vein, I've written up a pre-scripted statement here. I feel like following in that line, requiring interpreters that are provisional, or I would say probationary interpreters, requiring them to work in a team until they are generalists. When I started out interpreting, I only worked in teams and I refused solo assignments. And I think that was very helpful to minimize the impact of my gaps in knowledge as a new interpreter. But secondly, I also want to emphasize potentially creating a system or creating a task force to determine the feasibility of putting in a data-driven accountability system where interpreters log their hours quarterly and the settings they're working in. Then that information could be provided to the board, and the board would be able to establish benchmarks based on the number of thousands of hours that they have interpreted that they should be achieving. Knowledge tests at a certain number of hours, and then reoccurring testing through the NIC every 1,500 hours, which I would say, based upon that, that's the equivalency of a part-time employment, 1,500 hours. Then we could compile that data and use it in the future to adjust those metrics and also determine the efficacy of continuing education requirements, mentorship programs, and how all of those things impact minimizing that timeline from ITP to certification. I think that model could potentially be beneficial and would in turn benefit the deaf community by providing more certified interpreters and benefit the, sorry, I'm a little bit fumbling here, benefit the ITP students because they graduating from the program would have a clear pathway forward, listing out how many hours they're expected to interpret and then what they're expected to achieve after a certain number of hours. Thank you for your time.
Anybody else would like to speak? They're welcome to raise their hand or. Sharon, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Sharon Gibbons and I'm a sign language interpreter. And mine is just a question. For the hearing next week, will there be put out someplace, sort of a draft of these things that have been that y'all have been coming up with in terms of rules so that people can see them prior to the hearing and have information in order to make any kind of comment? Is that how it works? Thank you.
Notice was sent out. It should have been sent out to all licensees on the 1st of the month that had all of the proposed language. The language that the committee is going over is not out to the public proposed yet in a formal way. I'm happy to send you the proposed rule documents so you have it for next week.
I believe I have those, and I think that those are sort of the original stuff that's been out there for some period of time. I think that's correct. I guess that's part of my question, is if any of these proposed rules that the RAC has been working on, if those will come into play at the hearing, or will just be going on the rules essentially that's in the legislation. And that's what we will be discussing, or the hearing will be discussing on Tuesday or Wednesday. Is that correct?
Yes, it will not be what the RAC's been talking about.
Okay.
Heather, just to add on to what Sammy said, in the future, after the RAC's work is done, then at that point in time, the rules will go to the board. And at that point in time, the board will decide what proposed rules will go out, and there would be an additional hearing, an additional rulemaking. So that's a different process, a different hearing, and a different time than what's happening next week with the rules that are already noticed and ready for next week.
This is Sammy. I will be getting out a letter at some point in the next month. That's kind of says that this is the track we're on now, and we're concurrently running this track. I just haven't. So, but that isn't on my list of things to do. So people understand, they'll have the dates, the new dates you guys said.
No, this is public comment, no. Help me understand. The work that the RAC has done thus far, none of those recommendations are what we are gonna have public comment on next week. Those are basically the ones that were drafted originally and sent out. Like a year ago. Has there been any additional changes?
This is Sammy. There was a few changes. It was January 1st. And there wasn't very many changes, but there were a few. There were a few, like submit, approve, and things like that. You have to compare them.
This is Amanda. I'm gonna speak English because I'm gonna ask Sammy a follow-up question to Mel's. So the hearing next week is about the proposed rules that have been noticed, I think is how you phrased that, Heather, told to people. That public comment that is being collected could lead to revisions before publication on June 8th of those rules by the board.
Yep.
Nothing to do with what we're doing,
Correct.
but they could take action on public comment that they receive.
Correct.
Okay.
So follow up to the follow-up. This is Mel. If I have really strong opinions about two things that aren't reflected in there, but we've already worked on them. But I think they're really important before June 8th, especially as a hiring entity. Would it be appropriate for a RAC member to make public comment as well?
Absolutely.
Okay, I just wanted to ask overstep. Thanks.
So if you can put it in writing so that the board can see and hear your voice, because they'll get a recording of the hearing, and I'm assuming they'll all listen to it, but otherwise they get my report, and I don't have the same voice as everybody else. So if you can put it in writing, it's really good, and you can come in and give verbal comment as well.
This is Sharon again. I put my hand back up. Is that okay?
This is Amanda, it seems yes.
Yeah. I know. I didn't want you to read the names.
Thanks. I just need to continue to sort of clarify this in my head. We have, what we have right now. And so if I'm understanding it right, with public hearing, if some of these things that the RAC has discussed, some of the provisional licenses, some of the other stuff that y'all have talked about, those could be a topic of public comment in the hearing. At that point, the board could potentially take that public comment and change the rules before it's, the seal of approval has been done. What is that, in May? Is that what I'm hearing? Things can change between now and May or June, correct?
This is Sammy. So things can change, but there are limits. Because we are looking for public comment. Changes can be made, but they can't be substantial changes. And let's say they do decide to go with everything that the RAC says, then we would stop. Heather and I would review and decide, is this too much? Do we need to go back up for proposed rules? Do we need to have 28 days? Because it's so much different. So yes, so much more different than we originally proposed it, that we need more comment. So yes, things can change, but they need to be, basically what the public got to comment about. You don't want to change it so drastic. And we have had situations where they wanted to change it drastically, start it over. So it is, yes, they can change, but not in a crazy way.
Thanks.
I'm not seeing anything hands raised, so.
All right. Any other board business?
Because I haven't read what you emailed me, and I apologize. For those little tiny changes, by any chance highlighted? Like, am I gonna catch them?
No.
No, okay, and then, of course, you might have picked up on this deaf interpreter thing that I'm passionate about. Is there a place in what has been proposed to catch the non-certified deaf interpreters so that they can practice in medical, like we've been talking about? Is that something I should spend some time drafting for you?
There's a sign language specialty training license, but that's the only specialty. There's nothing.
So I should look at treating.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's the only specialty. Okay.
We have to formally adjourn.
Yeah, meeting adjourned.
In the gavel.
I know, we have a gavel. We might have to.